Our main lead just walked into a school martial arts exam and ended up leaving the masters there in absolute shock. Despite having low vitality points, he unleashed a strike with such terrifying power that it actually reached the level of a master. Even the most gifted students usually take an entire month just to reach the beginner stage. But when the top martial arts grandmaster of the human race saw this kid's records, even he started shaking, dead set on taking this absolute monster as his disciple. Little did they know, during a battle that pushed him to the brink of death, he was accidentally chosen by the gods. He gained access to a martial arts space system where a clone can train his body, allowing him to reach perfection in any technique in record time. Plus, every time he takes down an enemy, he earns martial arts points. Spending those points can boost his vitality and strengthen his physical stats. But just a few days ago, he was still just an ordinary student in a martial arts class. Although he had decent talent, everyone labeled him as nothing more than a training freak. Did he care? Not one bit. All that effort was for one goal: becoming a martial artist as soon as possible so he could give his aunt and uncle a better life. You see, his parents died in a monster disaster when he was only 3 years old. His aunt and uncle were the ones who raised him, and when they realized he had a talent for fighting, they gave everything they had to support him. In a world crawling with monsters, being a martial artist is the fastest way to make serious money. But today, when he got home from school, he accidentally overheard a conversation that broke his heart. His aunt was planning to stop taking her medicine to save money, and his uncle was looking for extra work, all just to scrape together $30,000 for his martial arts exam fee. In that moment, he didn't know whether to feel happy or miserable. He was training so they could live better, but instead, he was just making their lives harder. He slapped himself across the face to snap out of it, then pretended he hadn't heard a thing as he walked through the door. He tried to help his aunt with her work, but they just told him to go rest, worried that he was already exhausted from training all day. Lying in bed, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Thinking about everything they had sacrificed, he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let them suffer like this anymore. As a martial apprentice, if he wanted to make tens of thousands in just a few days, there was only one real option: the underground arena. The night passed quickly, and by the next morning, a female announcer stood in the middle of the ring, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Welcome everyone to the apprentice level challenge. No rules, no mercy, only winners and losers. Our challenger today is Minato. If he wins 4 matches in a row, he takes home a $60,000 prize. If he loses, he gets nothing." As soon as she said that, the crowd started buzzing. Some random nobody taking on a gauntlet challenge? He had to be suicidal. The announcer nudged Tu Hong in the chest, telling him he needed to hype up the crowd. He was confused at first, but when she told him to talk some trash, he just nodded and dropped a line that set the whole place on fire. "I am the strongest below the master level. If you are weak, stay out of my ring." The crowd immediately started booing and throwing insults, everyone waiting to see him get crushed. But then, the match started. Standing in the center of the ring, Tu Hong's eyes turned cold and serious. He scanned the room, sensing a terrifying amount of bloodlust. But he knew this was the only place that could get him his tuition money fast. He tightened his grip, thinking to himself that as long as he relied on his diamond fist, winning a few matches would be a breeze. Right then, a guy in a wolf mask jumped onto the stage, let out a nasty laugh, and barked, "You arrogant brat, let me show you how a real man fights." Facing the wolf-masked man charging at him like a maniac, Tu Hong stayed completely calm. A small smirk formed under his own mask. To his eyes, the opponent had plenty of energy, but his stance was sloppy and full of holes. This was going to be easy. Sure enough, the guy swung a punch, still shouting insults mid-swing. Tu Hong shifted his weight into his palm and unleashed a clean, sharp strike called the Glimmering Palm. With just one hit, his opponent was sent flying right out of the ring before he could even blink. He raised his hand and said firmly, "Next." The announcer screamed into the mic, "Minato wins the first round." The crowd went wild, cheering at the top of their lungs. But before the noise could even die down, another guy jumped up, his hair messy and his eyes full of confidence. "You got lucky that time, kid, but your luck just ran out." Tu Hong just chuckled and gestured for him to come forward. He quickly analyzed the man's build and realized he was strong, making him the perfect test subject for his diamond fist. The opponent didn't waste time and lunged in. Tu Hong stood his ground and blocked, their fists colliding with a force that left the other guy gasping. Man, this kid's power is insane. But Tu Hong realized the guy's raw strength still didn't match his own. After the clash, The guy put too much weight into his upper body, leaving his waist wide open. Sensing the opening, Hong spun around and delivered a precise kick to the weak spot. The result was the same as before. His opponent was blasted out of the ring and hit the floor unconscious. The crowd was in awe of his power. Hong looked down and calmly repeated, "Next." Minato has won 2 matches in a row. On the second floor, a man with brown hair watches in silence, his gaze growing more intense. He thinks to himself, he hasn't even reached the level of a semi-warrior, yet his power is leagues beyond any ordinary martial student. This kid is no simple fighter. By the time the 3rd match ends in a flash, the man is even more certain of his assessment. He's not quite at the top level yet, but he's far above the bottom. This is exactly the kind of person who is perfect for manipulating the arena. He turns and barks an order, "Bak Ho, go recruit him, but remember, don't let anyone know you're already a full-fledged warrior." Down in the ring, Hong clenches his fists, feeling the tension in his muscles. His diamond fist has finally reached the realm of subtle mastery. Facing off against regular martial students is no longer a challenge for him. Just one more match and 60,000 will be his. But right then, the whispers from the crowd make him freeze in his tracks. Bak Ho is entering the ring? Isn't he a semi-warrior? How is this not cheating? Hong immediately drops into a stance, his expression turning deadly serious. A semi-warrior. This match is definitely going to be tougher, but I can't afford to lose. Across from him, Bak Ho smirks and beckons him with a mocking hand. "Relax, I'll go easy on you." The signal rings out, and the final title defense match begins. Without a second's delay, Hong goes on the offensive, pouring everything he has into the very first strike. Their fists collide, sending a powerful shockwave through the air, but Hong's arm begins to tremble. Something is wrong. This isn't the strength of a semi-warrior. He's a true warrior, and he's deliberately suppressing his internal energy. Before he can even think, Bak Ho counterattacks. A flurry of punches slams into his chest. It's the Thunderbolt fist. Every blow feels like a strike of lightning, forcing Hong back as he winces in agony. Is this the true power of a warrior? The crowd holds its breath as they watch. 3 consecutive Thunderbolt strikes, and you're as good as dead. Bak Ho sneers, his attacks becoming even more vicious. All you can do is hide behind your guard? Is that all you've got? Hong is trapped in a defensive position. If this keeps up, it's only a matter of time before he goes down. I have to find a chance to strike back, but in a split second of distraction, his opponent's fist smashes directly into his face. The blow sends him crashing to the floor, his breathing ragged and his vision starting to blur. Bak Ho walks over and steps on him, his voice cold as ice. "You won't get a single cent for this match, but my master wants to recruit you. If you know what's good for you and listen, you'll still get your prize money." It's a tempting offer, but it would mean throwing away his principles. Hong grits his teeth and refuses flat out. "I don't do that kind of dirty work." Bak Ho's eyes immediately turn cold. "Then there's nothing left to say. I guess I'll just have to cripple you." At that very moment, a voice echoes in his ears. "Become a warrior." Hong jolts awake and rolls away, dodging a kick by a hair's breadth. Bak Ho pauses in surprise, while Hong feels like his entire body is on fire. "I can't fall here. I absolutely won't." Even after taking the Thunderbolt fist, he stands back up, leaving his opponent in total shock. His mind is filled with images of his aunt and uncle. "I have to become a warrior to give them a better life. But is it worth losing my soul as a warrior?" After a brief moment of doubt, his eyes fill with iron determination. "No, I won't accept a future like that." Suddenly, a system interface appears before him. "For your family, for your conviction, how much are you willing to pay?" Without needing to think twice, his aura explodes. His answer is simple: everything. Just as he's about to collapse, the world beneath Hong's feet suddenly falls away. The ring vanishes. The crowd disappears. It's as if the entire world has been wiped clean. He stands frozen, eyes wide as the space around him turns into a bizarre void. A massive silhouette looms before him, radiating a suffocating pressure. Hong stammers, "Where am I? Who are you?" A cold, mechanical voice rings out, "I will give you a chance." Immediately after, a golden screen pops up in front of him. Hong stares blankly at the lines of text. Name, Hong. Vitality, 85. Spirit, 23. Mortal physique, 3%. Mission, the path of the arena. Skills, Diamond Fist, subtle mastery, 7%. Glimmering palm, proficient, 35%. Void stepping footwork, proficient, 56%. Martial points, 0. He blinks repeatedly. The screen is displaying his entire status. Driven by curiosity, he taps on the mission tab, and a new message appears. Random mission, Path of the Arena, Beginner's Guide. Before he can even process what's happening, another Tahong suddenly appears and attacks without a single word. A fist flies at his head, forcing him to duck in a panic, cold sweat pouring down his face. He stares at his opponent, it's his own clone, and it's using the diamond fist. But its movements are far more refined, every single motion as perfect as a textbook example. Within seconds, Tahong regains his composure. With such a perfect model in front of him, it would be a waste not to learn. He immediately lunges forward to counterattack. He watches every move, mimicking and adjusting his own form. At one point, the clone even grabs his hand as if it's personally coaching him, leaving him both startled and enlightened. He quickly jumps back to maintain his distance, his eyes darting toward the system panel. His diamond fist mastery has already jumped to 10%. It was only at 7% before. It increased that much in just a few moments? He clenches his fists and charges back in without hesitation. With every punch thrown and every step taken, his stats begin to skyrocket. Diamond fist jumps from 15 to 23%. Void stepping footwork climbs from 59 to 70%, and then it breaks through. His flickering light steps reached 100% micro mastery, and his void walking steps were perfected right along with it. Finally, his diamond fist surged, breaking through straight into the grand completion stage. After a grueling battle, he barely managed to defeat his own clone. Gasping for air, Tahong clenched his fists and let out a gritty laugh. Thank God for this system. Just then, a notification rang out. Congratulations, player, for completing the Arena Path mission. Rewards have been issued. Would you like to return to reality? Without a second thought, he replied, yes. In the blink of an eye, his consciousness snapped back into his body, and there was White Tiger, charging right at him with a murderous look on his face. The guy was running his mouth off, but this time Tahong just casually leaned to the side to dodge him, his voice chillingly calm. Too slow. White Tiger froze, and before he could even react, a fist slammed squarely into his face. The tiger mask shattered into pieces, shards flying everywhere in front of the stunned crowd. The entire arena went dead, silent. Nobody could believe what they just saw. Tahong stood his ground, looking down coldly at his unconscious opponent. Then, he calmly asked, "That is my fourth win. When do I get my prize money?" The female announcer stuttered as she spoke. "Successful defense. Your reward is 60,000 yuan. Up on the second floor, the brown-haired man's face turned sour. Diamond fist at grand completion? How could a mere martial student pull that off? Even many seasoned martial artists haven't reached that level yet. He immediately ordered his men to tail him and dig up everything they could on his identity. His two subordinates bowed and acknowledged the command. Leaving the arena, Tahong stepped into a dark alleyway, but it wasn't long before he realized someone was tailing him. His expression shifted slightly as he sped up, eventually turning into a hidden corner. He vanished completely. When the two pursuers reached the spot, there was nothing but empty air. Their faces instantly paled. The two trackers just stood there like idiots, glancing around but finding no trace of him. They were both confused and starting to sweat. The boss gave them a job. They had to find out who this guy was no matter what. But they had no idea that Tahong was already watching them from above. He looked down with cold eyes. "You still want to follow me? You are literally asking for death." The full moon hung high, bathing the city in a soft, pale glow. It didn't take long for him to get home. When he walked in, Two-Man's hands started shaking as he looked at the stack of cash in the boy's hand. "Tahong, did you rob a bank? Where on earth did all this money come from?" Tahong just calmly explained, "I am working as a coach at a local dojo. The owner saw my potential and wanted to help me with my martial arts training." Tuvan heard this but still felt uneasy. "Didn't you say that place was cheap before?" He gently took their hands, his voice steady. "You guys don't trust me?" Hearing that, Two-Man laughed. "Right. Our little Hong has never told a lie since he was a kid." Tuvan smiled along. Their boy was really going places. Once the two of them went to bed, Hong sat alone on the rooftop under the moonlight. His mind was racing with a million thoughts. The martial arts exam fee was covered, the rent was paid, and his aunt's medical bills weren't a burden for now. He looked at the system interface in front of him. Being able to turn the tables like this, it was all thanks to this thing. But aside from his martial skills, his other stats didn't seem to have changed. Right then, a notification popped up. Defeating your opponent earned you 67 martial points. Martial points can be used to increase vitality and martial skills. Tu Hong stared at the number and decided to test it out right away. His eyes landed on his vitality stat, which was at 90. As soon as he dumped the points in, his whole body felt like it was on fire. His blood felt like it was boiling, his pupils turned a fiery red, and a massive surge of power flooded through him. He was panting, but his heart was racing with excitement. Vitality at 90. I have finally hit the standard for a true martial artist. Not only that, but his body felt tougher, and his previous injuries were starting to heal. That feeling of raw power made it impossible for him to sit still. I have got to find a place to test my actual strength. Acting on the thought, Tu Hong vaulted across the rooftops, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Maybe I should head to the school's training grounds. They have a combat power tester there. In no time at all, he showed up at the school's outdoor martial arts field. Right in front of him was a level 1 combat power testing machine. He took a deep breath, dropped into a stance, and thought, I will just try using 70% of my power for this punch. His eyes flashed, his fist clenched tight, and he drove it straight into the machine. With a loud boom, Tu Hong pulled his hand back, gasping for air. But a second later, his face completely froze. The machine was broken. He stood there stunned for a few seconds before a slight panic set in. Oh man, the quality of this thing is garbage. I hope they do not make me pay for it. Just then, a furious shout came from the distance. What the hell is going on in the middle of the night? Tu Hong jumped and bolted. Time to get the heck out of here. In another corner, old Lee had been woken up and was swearing up a storm. Which one of you punks broke the school's tester? It has got to be those two kids, Chen Shan and Chen Lu. Just wait until school tomorrow. I am going to give them a piece of my mind. Monday morning arrived in a flash. Inside the school gym, the atmosphere was buzzing as usual. Tu Hong stood with his friends, gesturing toward Chen Shan, whose face was covered in bruises, and whispered a question. Why does he look like he got hit by a truck? A bald student leaned in close to explain. I heard Chen Shan smash the testing machine last night and then refused to admit it, so the principal dealt with him personally. Hearing this, Tu Hong paused for a second, feeling a pang of guilt deep down, because he knew he was the one who caused all that mess. Right then, old Lai's voice boomed over the speakers, telling everyone to quiet down as he announced a very special guest for the day. It was the rank 3 martial artist, Tran Thien, who was there to teach a C-rank martial art called the Thunderbolt Punch, and the whole room immediately erupted. People were whispering that a C-rank skill usually costs at least 100,000 out in the real world, so this was a massive win for them. Tu Hong locked in, his mind instantly flashing back to White Tiger, the guy who had used that exact same Thunderbolt Punch against him. Every strike was like 3 layers of force stacked on top of each other, and the power was absolutely terrifying, making this an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. Tran Thien didn't waste any time with small talk, bluntly stating he'd demonstrate the technique 10 times, and how much they learned was entirely up to them. As he showed them the moves, he explained that the Thunderbolt Punch is all about raw, explosive power, and once you reach the entry level, you can produce a sound like a single crack of thunder. Mastery takes 3 sounds, the inner circle takes 5. 7 sounds mean you've reached great success, and 9 is absolute perfection. But he told them not to get ahead of themselves. He said just reaching the entry level today would be an achievement. Then he started the second demonstration, telling the students to follow his lead. A few hours passed, and the entire hall was practically dead, with everyone gasping for air and complaining that C-rank martial arts were just way too difficult. They were desperately asking each other if anyone had found a secret trick, but most just shook their heads in defeat until Tran Sun suddenly bolted upright. With a face full of excitement, he yelled that he'd reached the entry level, and everyone stared at him with a mix of shock and pure jealousy, thinking that a genius really is just built different. Old Lai proudly introduced Tran Sun to the guest, but Tran Thien only responded with a cold, mocking laugh. He asked if this was really what they called a genius, saying the kid wouldn't even be qualified in the outside world, and his blunt words left the students speechless. The two then walked out of the hall together, chatting as they went, with one of them sighing about how subpar the students were. The other reminded him of how brutal the martial path is, saying that without talent, all the hard work in the world is basically useless. But just as they were talking, a massive sound echoed from up ahead. Boom, 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 and both of them stopped dead in their tracks. Tran Thien's eyes nearly popped out of his head as he screamed, asking how there could be 7 thunderclaps, and if a student had actually reached the great success stage. Old Lai was stunned into silence, stammering that it was impossible since he'd never heard of any student doing that. yet the person was clearly wearing a school uniform. To reach great success after only half a day of teaching was beyond any logic, but then, the sound erupted once again. This time, there were even more, and Old Lai's voice trembled as he counted 9 sounds, wondering if his ears were playing tricks on him, while Tran Thien stood there like a statue. Then, it was like a light bulb went off in his head, and his eyes lit up with fire as he clenched his fists, his entire aura exploding as he threw a thunderbolt punch of his own. An explosion rang out with 8 consecutive thunderclaps, and he froze before bursting into laughter, realizing he'd finally broken through, because those sounds had shown him the way. He knew that without that inspiration, he might have never reached this level in his entire life, but his joy was short-lived as he suddenly snapped back to reality. He urgently yelled for them to find that student, and they both went running back, but the spot was already empty, and no one knew where the kid had gone. By then, Tu Hong had already left the school and was walking down the street alone, sighing about how much energy a C-rank martial art actually drains. It was way more exhausting than the D-rank diamond punch, but the results were undeniable, as he had already pushed the thunderbolt punch to the level of perfection. He checked his system panel. Blood was at 90, 1.7, spirit was 23, and his physical constitution remained the same. His skills showed the thunderbolt punch at perfection and diamond punch at great success, with other skills steadily rising, but his martial points were still at 0. He frowned slightly, wondering if he could earn points without being in a life-or-death battle, so he decided to head back to the Angry Thunder Dojo. As soon as he stepped into his workplace, the intense training atmosphere was as lively as ever, and a brown-haired young man walked up to greet him. The guy asked what he was doing there today, and Tu Hong just gave a light smile, saying he just wanted to get some practice in. But before he could get very far, a scene stopped him cold. A student was being kicked across the floor, and the one who did it was none other than Lai Wiem. Lai Wiem smirked and said in an annoying tone, asking if the kid dared to say he was a bad teacher, telling him to just admit he was slow instead of making excuses. Tu Hong looked toward the commotion, frowning as he quietly asked the guy next to him what the hell was going on. His coworker leaned in and whispered that since Tu Hong hadn't been around, he didn't know a new instructor had arrived, someone very strong but who looked down on everyone else. Apparently, the instructor was lazy with his teaching, and that guy, Li Wiem, was his disciple, who was just as arrogant and powerful, and just as Tu Hong looked over, he saw Lai Wiem raising his fist again, yelling at the student, and asking how a loser like him dared to challenge him. Without saying a word, Tu Hong stepped forward and grabbed the guy's arm, his eyes turning cold as he told him to take it easy since they were just sparring. Li Wiem instantly lost it, screaming at Tu Hong to let go and asking who the hell he thought he was, challenging him to a one-on-one fight in the ring if he had the guts. Tu Hong didn't back down for a second, simply nodding and telling him he'd take him on, but just as the tension reached its peak, Ngu Vien walked in and shouted for everyone to stop the noise, asking why they were causing trouble when class was about to start, making Li Wiem instantly flinch. Li Wiem spat out that Tu Hong was lucky today and turned his back to leave, while Tu Hong just watched him go, his gaze darkening. He thought the guy was way too full of himself, as Ngu Vien stood in the middle of the class and coldly announced it was the final session for the Raging Sea Spear technique, and just like before, he'd only show it once. The group of students immediately crowded around, but before the instructor even started, he let out a cold remark. "I do not believe a single one of you has the brains to learn this." With that, he swung the spear for the demonstration, his movements fast as a gale and as powerful as a crashing wave. He finished just as quickly as he started, glancing around the room. How much you actually pick up is your own problem. Then, he carelessly tossed the spear to the ground and turned to leave, leaving the entire group standing there in a daze. The room immediately exploded into chaos. The students in the back couldn't even see what happened before it was over. How were they supposed to learn like that? But amidst the confusion, Tu Hong's eyes were completely different. Every single move from moments ago was etched clearly into his mind. The flow of motion, the power output, even the rhythm of the transitions, everything was being deconstructed step by step. In his heart, he finally understood. The core of this spear technique was to move like a sea dragon, continuous and relentless. Without a second thought, Tu Hong picked up the spear to give it a shot. In an instant, a faint green aura swirled around the tip of the spear as he executed each move with perfect fluidity. The crowd around him stood there with their mouths hanging open. No way. Did he actually learn it? What kind of insane talent is this? Or are we all just that pathetic? The noise quickly brought Li Wiem back. He pushed through the door and barked out a question. What is all this racket? Who learned it? But when he shoved his way in and saw Tu Hong, his expression shifted instantly. Did this brat really figure it out? A spark of interest flared up in him as he narrowed his eyes. Well then, I should see what he is really made of. Hey kid, let me give you a little tip on how to handle a spear. Tu Hong turned toward him and gave a calm nod. Fine. The person next to him tried to pull him back, whispering a warning to not be reckless because that guy was a monster. But Tu Hong just gave a short reply. Relax. He stepped forward, spear in hand, his gaze steady. Show me what you have got. Lai VM immediately stepped back into a stance before suddenly exploding forward. His Raging Sea spear technique at the entry level lunged forward like a surging tide. Just as the spear tip was about to strike, Tu Hong let out a soft breath, his body moving as gracefully as water rippling outward. The spear in his hands shifted forms. It wasn't as aggressive as his opponent's, but it was seamless, elegant, and never-ending. Li VM's attack froze mid-air as his pupils shrank. Only one thought echoed in his mind. This is impossible. This is not entry level. This is the mastery level of the Raging Sea technique. Tu Hong tightened his grip on the spear. He muttered under his breath, Raging Sea technique, mastery. Then, with a powerful swing, the two spearheads collided, letting out a deafening boom. A shockwave rippled through the air. As Lai VM stumbled back to block the blow, he could not hide the sheer terror on his face. This kid hasn't even reached the martial artist realm yet, so how could he possibly have reached mastery in this spear technique so quickly? Tu Hong's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold golden light. He snapped his wrist, releasing a burst of power in a split second. Li VM's spear was knocked clean out of his hands, skidding across the floor. The system chimed in his head, defeated a higher-level opponent. 35 martial points awarded. Tu Hong looked at the notification, and it all clicked. It turned out that even a normal spar could rack up martial points. That meant from now on, all he had to do was find people to spar with constantly. On the other side, Li VM slumped to the ground, his eyes vacant. He kept mumbling to himself, No way, this can't be happening. How can anyone master the Raging Sea technique that fast? His eyes suddenly turned bloodshot, filled with rage and resentment. What was the point of all my years of hard training then? Losing all sense of reason, he lunged forward to strike again in a fit of desperation, but a commanding voice boomed out. Enough, stop this. Dean Nagu had appeared out of nowhere, standing right there with a freezing gaze. He stepped forward without a word and delivered a sharp slap that left Lai VM reeling. His voice was stern. If you cannot even face defeat, you have no right to call yourself a martial artist. Li VM stood there, completely stunned. Dean Nugu glanced at the spear that had been knocked away, a hint of shock visible in his eyes. To reach mastery after seeing it just once. Even the top-tier geniuses in the capital might not be able to pull that off. Thinking this, he pushed Lai VM's head down to force an apology. He sighed inwardly. This kid had talent but was way too arrogant. Maybe getting crushed like this wasn't such a bad thing. He then turned to Tu Hong, his voice softening. Little brother, today's incident was due to my lack of discipline over my student. I hope you can overlook it. Tu Hong watched the man's attitude flip like a switch and couldn't help but be impressed. He really was a pro at handling these situations. As night fell, the streets gradually grew quiet. Tu Hong walked home, replaying everything that had happened that day. He was exhausted, but he had gained so much. He opened his system panel to check his progress. Not only had he learned the Bolt Strike Fist and the Raging Sea Spear, but he had also piled up a good amount of martial points. This was a massive step forward, but as he thought about the upcoming exam, his expression darkened. The kids from rich families had been prepping with high-end alloy weapons for a long time, while he was still empty-handed. He clenched his fists tight. A decision began to form in his mind. He was already comfortable with the spear, so he would stick with it. What he needed most right now was a high-grade alloy spear. But when he looked at the price tag, all he could do was give a bitter laugh. The money he had wasn't even enough for his aunt's medicine, let alone a weapon. As that thought crossed his mind, he couldn't help but sigh. Is there really no faster way to rake in some cash? Right then, a notification pinged from the system. Monster activity is surging in the wilderness outside the Star City. The city lord is summoning warriors for a hunt, and the bounty is massive. Tu Hong paused, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. Going outside the city walls to hunt monsters, that was no walk in the park. Darkness draped over the city. Inside their cramped home, Tu Van was applying medicated patches to Tu Man, scolding him softly as she worked. Look at yourself. Tu Hong already gave us money, so why are you still working yourself to the bone? Man immediately shot back. He is still just a kid. How can I let him carry the whole world on his shoulders? I need to save up as much as I can for him while my body can still take it. Just then, the door creaked open and Hong walked in. Auntie, uncle, I am back. Seeing him, Man instantly broke into a smile. You are home, Hong? The boy quickly stepped forward and took the supplies from Van. Let me do that, auntie. You should get some rest. Van sighed but handed them over, muttering under her breath. This boy. I told him to go rest, but he never listens. Hong carefully applied the medicine to Man is back. His movements slowed down and his voice softened. Uncle, I can make my own money now. You don't have to break your back working anymore. Just stay home and look after auntie. Man let out a helpless chuckle. Fine, but you know I am not the type to just sit around doing nothing. He then gave a confident grin. Don't worry, I will only take on light work to cover the bills. I won't push myself too hard. Van watched the two of them and smiled gently. Hong will need a lot of money for his martial arts studies later on. Whatever your uncle and I can contribute will help save up for your future. Hearing that, Hong fell silent, a heavy feeling rising in his chest. His aunt and uncle were so used to suffering. Unless he had enough money to ensure they were set for life, they would never stop pushing themselves. His gaze turned sharp. He definitely couldn't afford to miss this monster hunt. Stepping out onto the balcony, Hong pulled up his system interface. He began calculating carefully. The wilderness was a death trap. To stay safe, he needed to get even stronger. He sat down and whispered to himself. Blood chi is at 95. I am just one step away from becoming a true warrior. 2 days later, in the school training hall, Hong collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. After grinding nonstop for 2 days, he had finally pushed all his martial skills to the perfect realm. He was drenched in sweat, but his eyes were glowing. I am ready. It is time to head out. Saturday morning, at the Star City Warrior base, Hong stepped inside and breathed a sigh of relief. Finally made it. This place is way out there. He looked around as he walked. He had only ever seen this on TV, but now he was seeing real warriors everywhere. Their aura was on a whole different level compared to regular people. He opened the map to check the bounty list. Unranked monsters are worth 300 blue star coins. Tier 1 low-level beasts are 1,000, mid-level are 3,000, and high-level are 5,000. His face soured as he kept reading. After the kill, you have to cut off the left ear as proof. No ear, no pay. This is some seriously old-school stuff. Right then, a burly man dropped a bag on the counter for a payout. Hong caught a glimpse. It was definitely full of monster ears. Suddenly, a commotion broke out behind him as a group of people strutted in arrogantly. Out of the way! Young Master Deep is here! Hong glanced over. These guys had the same vibe and flashy gear as the White Tiger gang from before. He stayed put and watched. People nearby started whispering. If his uncle weren't the one in charge here, someone would have put him in his place a long time ago. I heard he got thrashed by someone recently. Hong kept quiet as he listened, but right then, young Master Diep's eyes locked onto him. It was a look of pure provocation. Hong didn't flinch. He just gave a cold stare back before turning to leave. He reminded himself that monsters weren't the only danger out there. People were too. At the gate, the guard frowned as he looked him over. You look pretty young. Is this your first time in the wild? And you are going solo? Seeing the boy's calm expression, the man just shook his head. Just another kid who doesn't know what fear is. Hong said nothing, stepped through the gate, and set foot on the lush green grass. Looking out at the vast forest, his gaze hardened. This time, I am coming back with a haul. 2 hours passed, but the forest remained eerily quiet. Hong stood under the canopy, scowling. Not a single monster in sight. Has the outer area been picked clean already? With that thought, he didn't hesitate and sprinted deeper into the woods. Suddenly, he froze mid-motion as his instincts screamed danger. From behind a massive tree ahead, a giant dark shadow emerged. Glowing red eyes locked onto him. Hong immediately dropped into a combat stance, steadying his breath. This is a Tier 1 low-level beast, a shadow phantom wolf. It was his first time seeing one in the flesh. The beast let out a low growl, baring its razor-sharp fangs before lunging with explosive force. Its massive claws tore through the air, heading straight for Hong. The shadow phantom wolf moved with such speed it sounded like a whip cracking. Hong's reflexes kicked in almost instinctively. He dropped his center of gravity, spinning to the side and dodging the lethal strike by a hair's breadth. Without giving the beast a chance to recover, He clenched his fist as bolts of electricity crackled around it. He lunged into the opening, unleashing a devastating blow powered by his mystic thunder dash. The punch slammed into the monster's gut with a muffled explosion. The shadow phantom wolf was sent flying, crashing into the dirt where it lay perfectly still. The silence lasted only a moment. Tahong stood perfectly still, his cold gaze locked onto his target, though his hands were trembling slightly. It wasn't out of fear, but a feeling he couldn't quite name, a surge of primal excitement. So this was what it felt like to fight a monster. It was far more intense than anything he had ever imagined. A clear plan quickly formed in his mind. With just one move, he had already finished off a low-tier, level 1 beast. But what if it were a mid-tier? Just as the thought crossed his mind, a murderous aura erupted from behind him. A mid-tier, level 1 berserk black bear appeared like a ghost, letting out a roar before lunging at him. But before it could even touch its target, a sudden, powerful force slammed it into the ground. Its heavy body collapsed, motionless. Tahong turned back to look, his eyes quickly calculating his next move. With his current strength, as long as he didn't encounter a level 2 beast, he could definitely hold his own. He reached down and grabbed the bear's ear as a trophy, a faint smirk playing on his lips. $3,000 isn't bad at all. As the system notification popped up, a spark of joy flashed into Hong's eyes. He had finally broken through to the rank of martial artist. But before he could celebrate, a massive explosion rocked the distance, making the ground shake violently. Tahong immediately turned his head, his eyes sharpening. That energy was no joke. Without a second thought, he bolted toward the source of the noise. When he arrived, he found a clearing that looked like a literal war zone, completely trashed. He jumped onto a large boulder to get a better look. In that moment, his pupils shrunk in shock. A massive black jade python was coiled in the middle of the battlefield, its endless body looking like a living nightmare. The surrounding warriors were being tossed around like rag dolls, unable to stand their ground against the beast. Tahong immediately tensed up, putting his senses on high alert. But the python had already spotted him. It let out a hiss and whipped its tail straight at the boulder. The strike was incredibly fast and heavy. Tahong managed to block it at the last second, but the shockwave sent him flying. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, staining the ground red. He staggered to his feet, glancing at the bodies of the fallen warriors scattered around before wiping the blood from his lip. There was no turning back. He spotted a spear lying next to a corpse and grabbed it without hesitation. "I am borrowing this for a bit." His voice was calm despite the surrounding carnage. Tahong stepped forward to face the giant serpent. Without fear or hesitation, he watched as the monster lunged, its mouth wide open and fangs bared, ready to crush everything. He leaned to the side to dodge, his mind remaining terrifyingly sharp. He quickly analyzed the situation. Taking down a high-tier, level 1 beast alone was almost impossible without perfect coordination. But his skills were on another level now. Pushing off a tree trunk, Tahong launched himself into the air. With perfect movement, he glided through the air, looking down at the giant python from above. The moment his plan was set, the spear in his hand vibrated with power. He channeled his energy and unleashed the Raging Sea spear technique. A single thrust pierced through the air, stabbing deep into the python's belly. A scream of agony echoed through the forest. But Tahong didn't stop there. He landed, spun around to pull the spear out, and kept moving like a shadow. He didn't give the beast a chance to react. A second strike, then a third spear's shadows repeatedly tore through the massive body. This sent the python into a state of pure chaos. Even while moving, he never stopped calculating his next move. The size difference was too huge. He couldn't finish it in one blow, so he had to wear it down and find a fatal opening. But right then, the massive tail swept toward him again. Tahong redirected his momentum and threw a thunderbolt fist. The punch slammed into the tail, forcing it to retract instantly. He immediately backed away, gasping for air. But his eyes never left the target. The python was weakening. Almost there, he thought, tightening his grip on the spear. But at that exact moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly hit him from behind. Tahong spun around in surprise. A large figure leaped down from a rock, charging at him with cold, murderous intent. He immediately raised his arms to block, but the impact was so powerful it sent him tumbling back, pain radiating through his entire body. Tahong's gaze turned ice cold. He had a giant python in front of him and a backstabber behind him. A group of strangers slowly approached. The leader let out a smug laugh, his voice dripping with provocation. Well, look who it is. How about you hand this black jade python over to us? Diep Thieu and his crew stepped in to block To Hong's path. Diep Thieu looked at him with a sneer. I didn't expect you to actually injure this black jade python. It is basically on its last breath. To Hong quickly calculated his odds. There were 5 of them, all martial artists. They had the advantage in numbers. Trantone stepped forward, raising his fist. Hey kid, get lost. To Hong's expression darkened as anger flared inside him. I only got pushed back because you sneaked up on me. Do you really think I can't handle a few punks like you? He clenched his fists, gathering every ounce of his power. A single punch blocked Trantone's strike, sending him reeling back in pure terror. Facing such overwhelming power, To Hong didn't give him a second to breathe, landing a brutal punch square in his face. His mask shattered, teeth flew everywhere, and Trantone collapsed right at Diep Thieu's feet. Diep Thieu sneered, Diamond Fist, not bad. I knew it was you, you stubborn ox. To Hong froze as memories flashed through his mind. Diep Thieu, the white tiger, shielded his face. You're the first person to ever humiliate me like this in public. He pointed a trembling finger. Kill him. To Hong gripped his spear tight and immediately bolted, leaping toward the dense forest on the cliffside. The thugs gave chase, spreading out to search. The thick forest is perfect for an ambush. Watch out, Minvu scoffed. There's a whole mob of us. Why are we scared of one brat? Right then, To Hong appeared behind him like a ghost on the wind. Minvu turned around only to meet eyes as cold as a blade. A single spear sent blood spraying, and he slumped over, out cold. Diep Thieu's face went pale. How is he so fast? The group huddled together, one of them stammering, That's the Thunder Fist. 9 sonic booms. Even a 3-star warrior might not master it to perfection. Sweat poured down Diep Thieu's face as he barked. Shut up! His mind was racing. This shouldn't be possible. High up in the trees, To Hong observed them. If he hadn't burned so much energy fighting that giant python earlier, he would have crushed them all by now. He slammed his spear into the ground. For now, he would have to pick them off one by one. The spear thudded into the dirt, making the group jump. In that split second, To Hong dove from the canopy, grabbed Thanha's head, and smashed it into the ground, following up with a kick to the face that knocked him out instantly. Van Tai panicked. Diep Thieu, this guy is a monster. We need to get out of here. Diep Thieu roared. Run? Like hell. I'm ending him today. To Hong moved through the trees like a shadow, slipping between 2 men and dragging Van Tai down by the skull. Diep Thieu's anxiety spiked. It had only been a few days, so how the hell did this kid get so strong? To Hong flickered in and out of sight behind him. Diep Thieu spun around but saw nothing, until those cold, sharp eyes appeared right at his back. To Hong tightened his grip on the spear. Finally, your turn. Diep Thieu sensed the danger and immediately gathered his strength. Don't think you've won yet. He unleashed his void finger, the force snapping tree trunks like toothpicks. To Hong ducked and weaved, dodging the chaotic barrage of energy blasts. He frowned slightly. That's some serious power. That technique is at least B rank. Diep Thieu screamed like a madman. You little brat, I've seen your face now. You dare hurt me? I'll wipe out your entire family. The moment those words left his mouth, To Hong's expression turned icy, his gaze sharp enough to tear the man apart. You actually dare to threaten my family? He lunged forward. Diep Thieu, terrified, kept barking threats. My uncle is the base manager. My father, but To Hong wasn't listening anymore. He clenched his fist, power surging through him, his voice dropping to a freezing chill. I liked you better when you were acting all high and mighty. A heavy punch landed, and Diep Thieu didn't even have time to react before he was sent flying, coughing up blood. His body tumbled down the cliff, crashing into a cloud of dust. To Hong stepped forward slowly, murderous intent radiating from him. You should have never mentioned my family. Diep Thieu couldn't believe To Hong was this powerful. Finally, he screamed, What the hell are you? But before he could finish, the python's tail slammed down on him. Then, the monster turned its sights on To Hong. The young man sighed. Wasting time with those idiots had allowed the python to fully recover. Level 7. Diep Thieu's lackeys scrambled back. Lu Hao clutched his arm, cursing. Damn it, that kid is a freak. Van Tai slumped on the ground, panting. Where's Diep Thieu? Is the kid dead yet? Just then, Minvu heard a noise. To Hong came charging toward them. Get out of the way. Minvu raised his hammer and roared. You brat, you still dare to show your face? Tran Kiat chimed in. I'm not letting you off this time. But before the three of them could move, they froze in horror. Looming behind Tahong was the giant python, jaws wide open. Tahong ducked the snap, but Tran Kiat and Lai Than weren't so lucky. They were swallowed whole. The system immediately pinged. Indirectly defeated warriors. Gained 30 martial arts points. Min Vu was swatted away by the tail, smashing into a tree and dying instantly. Another 30 points. Tahong glanced back, surprised he could farm points this way. But there was no time to celebrate as the python lunged again. He leapt into the air, his mind working fast. After all these battles, he had enough points to break through. He just needed a safe spot. His eyes lit up when he saw a cave ahead. He dove inside, with the python hot on his heels. It slammed its head against the entrance, shattering rocks. Its head squeezed in but got stuck, its mouth snapping and revealing razor-sharp fangs. Tahong sat deep inside, ignoring the monster's roars as he pulled up the system screen. Name, Tahong, Blood and Kwai, 96. Spirit, 23. Physique, 3% mortal body. Skills, Raging Sea Spear, Thunder Fist, Diamond Fist, and Sky Step, all at perfect level. Martial arts points, 504. He immediately dumped every point into blood and chi. Faster, faster. His body began to burn, as if molten lava was flowing through his veins. A red glow erupted, engulfing him. Even the python outside froze, sensing the overwhelming pressure. At that very moment, Tahong snapped his eyes open, breaking through to become a first-rank martial artist. Finally, he was a true warrior. An invisible force swirled around his arm. He glared at the retreating serpent, and his voice went ice-cold. Now, it is my turn. Tahong lunged out of the cave, throwing a straight punch with explosive power that sent the beast flying, blood spraying everywhere. He did not stop there. He unleashed his diamond fist, and the serpent let out a guttural roar, swinging its tail to counterattack. Tahong gritted his teeth and blocked the strike, though the impact made him cough up blood. But his gaze only grew sharper. He snatched a nearby branch, channeled his energy with a roar, and swung it down with all his might. The strike landed dead center, and a burst of energy followed by a flash of blue light tore through the air. The serpent let out a pained shriek. Tahong's entire body erupted with golden lightning as he activated his thundering fist. He lunged forward, delivering one final blow to its head. A massive explosion echoed as the giant serpent collapsed to the ground. Tahong stood over the carcass, gasping for breath. Even though the beast had been injured before, being able to defeat it head-on was a massive step forward for him. The system chimed in his head, notifying him that he had earned 92 martial points. He leaned down to process his loot but suddenly stopped. It does not have any ears, so whatever. His gaze shifted to young Master Deep, who was lying motionless on the ground. Tahong walked over, his voice flat and cold. Ending up like this is actually lucky for you. He searched the body and pulled out a high-level martial arts manual. As darkness fell, the giant snake's body blocked the cave entrance, leaving only a small gap for the flickering light of the campfire to peek through. Tahong sat cross-legged and began to comprehend the void finger technique. His consciousness sank into a simulation space, where a shadowy figure suddenly charged at him. Tahong leaned to the side to dodge, then countered with the void finger. A streak of light pierced through his opponent. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his eyes darkening. This B-grade technique is definitely the real deal. A few days later, deep in the forest, a massive bear let out a roar and charged. Tahong stood his ground, unfazed. Time to see the true power of the void finger. Boom! The bear crashed to the ground. He had reached perfect mastery. It was finally time to head back. By now, the martial artist base was in a total frenzy. 230,000? That is insane. They are all first-rank beasts. 72 low-tier, 83 mid-tier, and 17 high-tier. That is a total reward of 406,000. Tahong stood in the middle of the crowd, looking calm, but his heart sank slightly. I think I might have overdone it. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed. An explosion rocked the central building. The base was under attack. Diepte appeared with a ferocious look in his eyes. Lock everything down. Do not let anyone leave. Deep Fong has been killed, along with 4 other martial artists. The crowd gasped in shock. Tahong stood by his vehicle, his expression cold. And so it begins. Diepte walked through the crowd, his eyes finally landing on Tahong. He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. I heard you earned 400,000 in rewards, all by yourself. You must be pretty capable, huh? Diepte glared at Tahong. Young man, I heard you managed to kill 400,000 worth of beasts on your own. You have got some serious skills. Hoi Nak, who was standing nearby, immediately chimed in with a sneer. Please. At most, he is just a beginner first rank. How could someone like him kill that many beasts? He definitely stole young Master Deep's bag. Search him immediately. Two men in black stepped forward, their fists glowing with energy and their eyes full of malice. Kid, do not fight back, or we will have to get rough. Right then, a cold spear tip suddenly appeared in front of his face, making the man freeze as his expression turned to pure shock. What do you think you were doing? The man's heart raced. He had not even seen the kid move his spear. Tahong replied calmly, I am a student from Star City First High. Are you sure you want to go through with this search? Hearing that, Diep Tay hesitated. The principal of First High was famous for being overprotective of his students. He was not someone to mess with, but this kid was just too suspicious. If he really did hunt all those beasts himself, he was a genius. Offending someone like that could be a huge mistake. He took a step forward, softening his tone. My nephew was attacked, and our family's martial technique was stolen. I need to find the culprit, so I hope you will cooperate. Tahong looked him straight in the eye. I just hope you do not end up framing an innocent person. Diepte thought for a moment before speaking. To compensate you for the search, I will give you 10,000. How about that? 30,000. Tuhong countered firmly. He had already done the math. Diepfong died by the serpent's fangs, and as long as they did not find the manual, no one could link it back to him. Diepte nodded. Fine. Dealing with the demand, they immediately began searching Tuhong and his belongings. Tuhong added coldly, make sure you search thoroughly. I do not want any false accusations hanging over my head. A moment later, the bodyguard reported back. There is nothing, sir. Diepte sighed and waved him off, handing over the 30,000. Tuhong let out a faint smile, remembering how he had burned the manual to ashes. Good thing I covered my tracks, or I would be in deep trouble today. He quietly slipped away from the crowd while Diepte continued to bark orders for the search to go on. No one leaves until I have cleared every single suspect. Tuhong thought to himself as he walked away. First, I need to get cleaned up and change clothes. Then, I will head to the Martial Artist Association to register. I need to get my official license as soon as possible. A little while later, in a room at an inn near the base, Tuhong sat on his bed and opened his system panel. He muttered under his breath, 534 martial points. That is a lot. Over the last few days, he had been obsessed with training his void finger and hunting beasts, so he had barely touched his points. The status screen appeared. Name, Tuhong. Vitality, 103+. Mentality, 23+. Body, Mortal Tier, 6%. Martial Art, Void Finger, Raging Sea Spear Art, Thundering Fist, Diamond Fist, Glimmering Palm, and Sky Step had all reached perfection. Total martial points, 534. Tuhong thought to himself, a level 1 beginner martial artist needs 100 chi and blood points, while the mid-stage requires 200. If I use all my martial points to boost my chi and blood, I can increase it by more than 50 points, and I'd only need 40 more to reach the mid-stage. But I haven't increased my spirit or constitution yet, so I have no idea how effective they'd be. He decided to test it out first, and the system began adding spirit points one by one. Tuhong frowned. After the boost, there didn't seem to be an obvious change, but his overall power felt slightly higher. He continued distributing the points. The system interface changed rapidly. Chi and blood, 123. Spirit, 26.5. Mortal constitution, 36.1%. All his martial arts were at the perfect stage, and his martial points were now 0. Tuhong nodded, stopping the constitution boost there, and dumping the rest into his chi and spirit. A massive surge of power coursed through his body. His muscles bulged outward before gradually shrinking back to their normal size. He let out a sigh of relief. If his body had stayed like that, it would have been hard to explain it to anyone else. An hour later, at the Star City Martial Artist Association, Tuhong walked up to the reception desk and said, Hello, I'm here to take the martial artist assessment. The staff member smiled and replied, Certainly, someone will lead you there right away. The clerk looked at Tuhong and smiled. You're so young. Is this your first time taking the exam? To be a level 1 martial artist, your chi and blood must reach 100 points, and your combat power needs to exceed 1,000. Good luck out there. Tuhong nodded. Thank you. Behind him, 2 people were whispering to each other. That kid came here alone. Does he not even have a master? At his age, he's probably just here to try his luck. Right then, something caught his eye. A massive testing machine was in operation. The examiner shouted, Candidate Chi and Blood, 102. Combat Power, 992. Assessment failed. The guy groaned in frustration. Damn it, I was so close. The examiner continued. Li Min, Chi and Blood, 105. You pass. Next up is the combat power test. Li Min stepped forward, putting all his strength into a punch against the machine. The numbers flashed, 1,763. The examiner nodded. Combat power, 1,763. You pass. The crowd immediately erupted. 1,763 points. He is almost at the level 1 mid-stage. Isn't he a disciple from the Bright Martial Arts Hall? What a genius. To Hong thought to himself, wait, isn't Li Yan also a disciple from the Bright Hall? Just how many disciples does that guy have? Li Min turned back to look at Tu Hong with a smirk. Your turn, kid. He felt nothing but contempt for him. He's so young and actually thinks he can pass? Does he really think he's some kind of genius? But a second later, gasps of shock rang out. No way. Is the Chi and Blood machine broken? How is it that high? The examiner looked at the display and announced clearly, Tu Hong, Chi and Blood, 123. You pass. Li Min was stunned, his heart racing, but he quickly tried to calm himself down. So what if his Chi is high? Combat power is all that matters. As Tu Hong stepped up to the machine, the official said, next is the combat power test. He took his stance, quickly calculating his status as a martial artist. My constitution has increased, and my strength has skyrocketed. 40% of my power should be enough, but if I fail, it'll be a pain. Let's go with 50%, just to be safe. With that thought, Tu Hong threw a decisive punch. A loud boom echoed as the machine was sent flying backward, slamming into the wall and shaking the entire room. The entire hall fell silent for a moment before erupting into total chaos. Li Min's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He sent the machine flying with one punch, and it didn't even look like he used a martial arts technique. Everyone around them was panicked. The combat power of a level 1 high-stage martial artist is only around 3,000 points. This number is absolutely insane. Up on the balcony, a young man said with a trembling voice, Master, it's that kid again. He is a total monster. The man behind him narrowed his eyes. It's him? Then I'm not surprised. Elsewhere in an office, Lin Xian was scrolling through her phone, grumbling to herself. The Yang City branch found another genius and they're bragging about it every day. If our Star City branch doesn't find someone who stands out, my position is as good as gone. Just then, a young man rushed in breathlessly and shouted, President, a total monster has appeared in the martial artist assessment. A beginner level 1 martial artist used pure physical strength to punch the testing machine across the room. His combat power reached 3,000 points. The scene cuts to the main hall of the Martial Arts Association where Tu Hong had just finished. A staff member quickly approached him. They offered to lead him to the second floor to finish his registration and collect his stipend. Everything seemed normal until a cold, female voice suddenly rang out from above, cutting everyone off. Looking up, they saw a woman leaning against the railing. Her sharp gaze swept down at them. With just a few short words, she made the staff member freeze in his tracks. The president herself had appeared. That woman was Wu Lin Xian, the president of the Star City branch of the Martial Arts Association. She was a legendary level 5 martial artist. Her aura was completely different from what Tu Hong had imagined. It wasn't flashy, but it commanded immediate respect. Without giving him a chance to think, she called out his name and ordered Tu Hong to follow her. The scene shifted to her private office, and the atmosphere changed instantly. The noise from outside was gone, leaving only the two of them facing each other. Wu Lin Xian looked at Tu Hong, unable to hide her annoyance as she mentioned Principal Li Chengshan, who had tried to hide a genius like him. Meanwhile, Tu Hong was still a bit dazed. He only came here to register and get his stipend, yet he'd been called into a private meeting with the president. It was clear that this was no simple matter, but he was about to get his answer very soon. She had already sent someone to handle all the paperwork and subsidies. What she truly cared about, though, was Tu Hong himself. The conversation quickly shifted to guiding arts, a subject Tu Hong only understood on a theoretical level. According to the books, it was simply a method of absorbing the world's spirit energy for cultivation, but Ngo Lam Tien immediately provided a different perspective. A small flame flickered to life in the palm of her hand, not as a mere performance, but as a clear demonstration of her point. Guiding arts aren't just for cultivation, they can be transformed into actual combat power. When spirit energy is converted into an elemental attribute, It can coat your strikes or even be projected from the body to increase damage. For an ordinary warrior, touching even a hint of an attribute is incredibly difficult, but for Tu Hong, it was a completely different story. Ngolam Tien pulled out a crystal orb to test his elemental compatibility. Average people only reach about 20 to 30%, and even a genius like her only hit 80%. She believed Tu Hong could surpass 90%, but when he touched the orb, a light erupted so violently it was blinding. Ngolam Tien stood frozen. 100% fire compatibility, no loss, no leakage, just perfect absorption. Before Tu Hong could even process what was happening, the president couldn't hide her sheer excitement. This meant he could utilize fire, spirit, energy with absolute efficiency, something even she had never achieved. This wasn't just a genius, a literal monster had appeared. Ngolam Tien slowly explained that with 80% compatibility, she still experienced a slight loss of energy, but even that was enough for her to become a rank 5 warrior and secure her position as president. The way she looked at Tu Hong had completely changed. His future achievements would undoubtedly far surpass her own. To think that a small place like Star City would produce a freak of nature on par with the geniuses from the capital or Magic City, it was almost too much to believe. Tu Hong looked down at the crystal in his hand, but his mind was elsewhere. The fire element was strong, but he was leaning more toward lightning. The moment that thought crossed his mind, the orb instantly transformed. The fiery red glow shifted into a dazzling golden hue. Crackling sparks of electricity filled the air, making it feel like time had frozen. Both of them were silent for several seconds. Tu Hong looked up, his voice a bit uncertain, and said, "My lightning attribute seems to be at 100% as well." Ngolam Tien's face twitched. This time, she couldn't keep her cool in the face of such an impossible reality. Dual attributes in fire and lightning, both at absolute levels, was a concept that went far beyond being a mere genius. But the shock wasn't over yet. Tu Hong continued to test them, and one by one, every other attribute lit up, all reaching a state of perfection. Ngolam Tien's face turned pale, and she finally slumped back into her chair, as if she had just witnessed something beyond human comprehension. She had always been considered a rare prodigy, reaching rank 5 at 30 years old. But in front of Tu Hong, she realized the true gap between them. There are some existences that simply cannot be measured by normal standards. Tu Hong, however, was facing a different dilemma. All 7 attributes were at 100%, so choosing just one felt like a total waste. He eventually asked her directly if he could learn the guiding arts for all 7 systems. Ngolam Tien immediately objected, stating that humans have limits, and even geniuses should only choose 2 systems at most. There was someone in the past who tried to master all 7, and after decades, they were still stuck as a rank 1 warrior. But Tu Hong wasn't in a rush to decide. He wanted to try them all before choosing the path that suited him best. All Ngolam Tien could do was sigh. She warned him not to let greed ruin his natural talent. Then, she shifted the topic to the upcoming monthly exam. The heavenly battlefield was becoming increasingly tense, and a massive war between the myriad races and humanity could break out at any moment. Because of this, nations were establishing training camps for geniuses. If he could take first place, she would personally recommend him. Hearing this, Tu Hong's expression darkened. Memories of the Great War years ago, when he lost all his loved ones. Those images came rushing back into his mind. He clenched his fist and accepted the invitation without a second thought. This time, he was determined to become stronger, strong enough that no one could ever touch the people he wanted to protect. Some time passed, and Tu Hong returned home. He showed his warrior card to his aunt and uncle, his voice calm but unable to hide his joy. Tu Man's hands trembled as he took it, unable to believe his nephew had truly set foot on the path of a warrior. Tu Hong smiled and said, "There is a monthly subsidy now, so you don't have to work so hard anymore, uncle." In that moment, he truly became the pillar of the entire family. When night fell, Tu Hong sat on the roof to continue his cultivation. When he opened his eyes, a light flashed in his pupils. He threw a punch, and a burst of flame ignited with the strike, before quickly dying out. This was the introductory level of the guiding art, but the power was incredibly weak compared to what he had expected. Looking at his system interface, he noticed a new entry for level 1, guiding art. Since it had a level, he wondered if it could be upgraded. But Ngolam Tien definitely never mentioned this before. A possibility slowly dawned on him. Maybe he was the only one who could level up the guidance technique. Tu Hong stared at the system interface, completely baffled. How on earth was he supposed to use this technique? Could he just burn martial arts points to upgrade it? After thinking it over and getting nowhere, he just brushed it off. He decided to practice the other guidance types first and figure it out later. He sat down right in the middle of the towering piles of books around him. Pretty soon, different streams of energy started swirling around his body. Reddish orange, deep blue, earthy yellow, and spiraling wind appeared one after another. In just 1 hour, he had brute forced the thunder, marsh, earth, and soul wind techniques all the way to level 1. But as soon as he finished, a major problem popped up. The 7 types of spiritual energy in his body were acting like sworn enemies, violently rejecting each other. Tu Hong frowned as he realized he could only use one attribute at a time. If he tried to force 2 together, they would clash wildly and just cancel each other out. He tried merging lightning and fire. They were supposed to be similar, but the second they touched, the energy went into a total tailspin. The sparks and flames in his hands vanished before they could even stabilize. Tu Hong grit his teeth, refusing to give up. He tried again and again, over and over. By the time dawn broke, he was drenched in sweat and gasping for air. But this time was different, just as he let out a roar, forcing the 2 energies to fuse. The fire in his palms suddenly stabilized, with golden lightning flickering inside. These 2 clashing powers actually became one. He slumped to the ground, exhausted but grinning. After a whole night of trying, he finally did it. Without wasting a second, Tu Hong headed out to test his new power. Standing in front of the level 3 combat power meter, he threw a punch, using only 30% of his strength. The numbers that popped up made him freeze. Over 2,300 points. Just a tiny spark of lightning fire was already this strong. What if he achieved a full fusion? He threw another punch, and this time the number shot past 3,000. With only 30% power, he was already at the level of a high stage rank 1 martial artist. Since his blood chi was only at 120, this level of growth was basically insane. Tu Hong looked at his fist, his expression turning serious. This was only 2 attributes fused. If he could fuse all 7 one day, just the thought of it felt heavy. He went back to the rooftop to keep experimenting. But this time, merging 3 attributes was 10 times harder. No matter what he did, he made 0 progress. He lay flat on the floor, panting. A thought suddenly crossed his mind. If he leveled up the guidance technique, would it make merging easier? But he was out of time. The monthly exam was tomorrow. If he wanted to keep getting stronger, he needed more martial arts points. The next morning, the whole student body gathered in the courtyard. The atmosphere was way more intense than usual. The principal announced that the situation on the front lines was getting tense. Nations had opened genius training camps, and anyone in the top 3 of the monthly exam would get a shot at joining. The whole courtyard exploded with excitement. Everyone knew this was a real chance to change their lives forever. While everyone else was fired up, Tu Hong just sighed, his mind on something else entirely. Apparently, the top 3 all get a spot, yet I am the one being told I have to take first place. Right then, a classmate leaned in and whispered to him, Tran Sun and Lai do have already broken through to rank 1 martial artists, and a bunch of people have learned the basics of the Thunder Fist. Tu Hong was a bit surprised. He had only been away for less than 10 days, and things had changed this much? But instead of worrying, his gaze grew even calmer. No matter how much stronger his rivals got, the gap between them and him, well, they were not even in the same league anymore. His classmate leaned closer, sounding worried. Lately, the school invited senior Tran Thien back to give private Thunderfist lessons to the gifted students. Tran Sun and Lai Du officially broke through to martial artists a few days ago. Their blood Kwai is already over 100. They can even pull off 3 sonic booms with the Thunderfist now. As soon as the words left his mouth, Tran Sun stepped up to provoke him. This time, I am going to show the whole school who the real #1 genius is. Hearing that, Lai Du just gave a cold laugh, telling him to wait until he gets crushed into the dirt. Just as the tension was reaching a breaking point, Tran Thien walked over and asked old Lai point blank, still no luck finding the person who can pull off 9 sonic booms with the Thunderfist? Old Lai shook his head. I have looked everywhere, but nothing. I am starting to think that person is not even a student at our school. Right at that moment, a group of people suddenly appeared behind them. Old Lai turned around and froze. Jiang Nam walked in leading 2 students, immediately mocking Old Lai for looking like a panicked old man. Old Lai snapped back, asking what on earth he was doing there. Jiang Nam just casually replied, just visiting an old friend, and to show off the 2 new disciples I took in this year. He then suggested having the top students from both sides face off after the monthly exam. Hearing that, Old Lai immediately went on guard. It was clear the guy was looking for trouble. If he refused, it would be the same as admitting their school did not have a single person worthy of stepping up to the plate. Seeing this, Jiang Nam pushed even further, throwing out insult after insult. Even Tran Thian, standing nearby, could not help but lose his temper. Just as the tension reached its peak, Li Yan suddenly leaned in and whispered something into Jiang Nan's ear. His expression shifted instantly, and he whipped his head around to scan the crowd of students. When he finally spotted Su Hong standing there, his face darkened immediately. He cursed under his breath, never imagining that little monster was actually a student from First High. If he let his two disciples go up against him, they would get humiliated for sure. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Nan's entire attitude did a complete 180-degree flip. He laughed it off, saying he was just joking earlier, and that there was no way his disciples could compare to the students of Old Li and Chen Tian. Li Ming and Li Yan quickly played along and admitted defeat, leaving the two teachers on the other side both furious and speechless. They knew he was playing games, but they couldn't say a word. Right then, the loudspeaker announced that the matches were starting. Number 665, Chen Bang, versus number 666, Su Hong. Up in the stands, Su Hong's friends were instantly worried. His first opponent was already a quasi-warrior talk about bad luck. Someone even yelled out, telling him to just give it his best shot and not to push too hard or he would get hurt. Down in the arena, Chen Bang took a fighting stance and taunted him, telling Su Hong to just walk off and forfeit. Otherwise, he would personally beat him into the dirt. But before he could even finish his sentence, Su Hong vanished right before everyone's eyes. In a flash, he appeared right in front of the guy, grabbed his jaw with one hand in a swift, decisive move, and slammed him straight into the ground. The entire stadium went dead silent. His friends stared with their mouths wide open, unable to believe that his strength had skyrocketed this much in just a few days. As for Su Hong, he just stood there on the stage, looking eerily calm, as if that move was nothing more than an effortless flick of the wrist. A single strike win against a quasi-warrior. The crowd barely had time to process it before the place exploded in cheers again. Su Hong continued to rack up wins with total ease, leaving everyone looking at each other in disbelief. A previously unknown student was now this powerful. Could he have already reached the rank of a true warrior? The atmosphere reached a fever pitch as everyone realized the final match was here. The name Su Hong was suddenly the center of attention. Up in the VIP section, Chen Tian narrowed his eyes, watching closely. He was clearly trying to remember something, but could not quite place it. Meanwhile, Old Li's face was heavy, with a mix of self-reproach and regret. How could he have overlooked a gem like this? If he really missed out on him, it would be a damn shame. Meanwhile, the semifinals were wrapping up with a tense showdown between Chen Shan and Li Du. The two were perfectly matched, every punch colliding with the sound of rolling thunder, making the air around them feel suffocating. Then suddenly, Chen Shan unleashed his power, flames erupting from his fists. It was an external attribute release. That is a level of progress not many can achieve. But Li Du just gave a cold smirk, as if it was not even worth mentioning. He immediately launched a barrage of overwhelming attacks. His thunder fist exploded with 5 distinct echoes. The entire tide of the battle shifted instantly. Chen Shan had almost no chance to fight back, and was defeated while everyone watched in shock. Seeing this, both Chen Tian and Old Li had pretty much reached their own conclusions. With his current level, plus his metal attribute and mastery of the thunder fist, Li Du practically had the win in the bag. Even though Su Hong had been impressive, without any guidance techniques, he was still considered a step below. However, someone thought otherwise. A sudden bet was placed, showing absolute faith in Su Hong, which turned the tension up even higher. Right after that, the final match officially began. Li Du stepped up full of confidence, his voice dripping with contempt as he told Su Hong he only got this far through luck, and that the #1 spot always belonged to him. The second he finished speaking, he lunged forward without hesitation, throwing a full-power 5-echo thunder fist right from the start. The crowd went wild, everyone thinking the match would end in a heartbeat. But contrary to what they expected, Su Hong did not even flinch. He stood his ground, clenched his fist, and met the attack head-on. The moment their fists collided, a shockwave boomed like a clap of thunder. Both were pushed back, but neither would give an inch. The fight quickly turned into a high-speed blur of motion. Every punch and every move left the spectators dizzy. But the more they fought, the more terrified Li Du became, because in just an instant, all 5 layers of his Thunderfist power were completely neutralized by Su Hong, as if they never even existed. He began to realize what was wrong. The opponent in front of him was not using any martial techniques at all. This guy was relying entirely on his raw physical stats and reflexes, yet he was still matching him blow for blow, and his punches were becoming terrifyingly heavy. The crowd slowly started to catch on. Su Hong was using pure, raw strength to go toe-to-toe with high-level martial techniques without falling behind at all. It sent shivers down everyone's spines. Up in the stands, Chen Tian's eyes lit up with excitement. He was certain Su Hong possessed an incredibly rare type of special physique. Meanwhile, old Li could not hide his pride and let out a loud laugh right in the middle of the crowd. Even so, the advantage had not fully shifted to Su Hong yet, because Li Du had mastered attribute energy, something that could create a massive gap in power. The two of them collided once more, and this time, the force was so intense that they were both sent flying backward. Li Tu managed to find his footing, his gaze turning cold as a surge of murderous intent flared up. He let out a furious roar. He was dead certain that the only one walking away as the winner was him. With a guttural scream, Li Tu charged straight ahead. His aura exploded, looking like he wanted to crush his opponent right then and there. Seeing this, Su Hong only let out a faint, cold smirk. At first, he had planned to test how far he could push himself, using just his raw physical strength. He didn't expect his opponent to lose his cool so quickly. He shook his head, his eyes gradually becoming sharp and piercing. If that was the case, there was no longer any need to hold back his power. Su Hong took a single step forward, and his entire vibe shifted instantly. Since you're getting serious, I guess I should show you some respect and do the same. Immediately after, he threw a punch. A flash of lightning erupted, leaving Li Tu frozen in place, unable to hide his utter shock. You can actually project an elemental attribute? Up in the stands, Chen Tian nearly jumped out of his seat, his face full of panic. Meanwhile, old Li's face went pale, his eyes trembling. That's not just any normal projection. That's the lightning attribute, the most destructive power in existence. The two collided, each impact carrying a terrifying amount of force. But after only a few exchanges, Li Tu could clearly feel the massive gap in their strength. Su Hong's lightning attribute completely overwhelmed his opponent's metal attribute, with every strike threatening to shatter his defenses. Su Hong kept that casual smile on his face, a golden light flickering in his eyes. I've already seen your ultimate move. Now it's my turn. In the next instant, his fist exploded with power. There was a deafening boom, and Li Tu was sent flying backward. His body slammed hard into the ground, completely out of control. Only one thought remained in his head. How could he have reached that level with 9 echoes? But Su Hong didn't stop there. He delivered a Hao Denja, forcing his opponent to cough up blood on the spot. The entire stadium went silent for a heartbeat, and then it exploded like a massive tidal wave. Everyone's jaws dropped in disbelief. The 9-echo Thunder Fist at the perfect realm. That's something even the teachers might not be able to pull off. Chen Tian stood there stunned, finally realizing that this was the mysterious genius he had been searching for all this time. Old Li burst into a proud, boisterous laugh, his voice echoing. He's not just a genius anymore, he's the dragon of Star City. He didn't even miss the chance to be snarky, saying that if a monster like this entered the training camp, those other so-called geniuses would be totally demoralized. Amidst the deafening cheers, Su Hong simply turned around and walked away quietly. Behind him, countless eyes followed his every move. Someone couldn't help but sigh in admiration. A golden dragon can't stay trapped in a small pond forever. Once it meets the wind and rain, it's bound to transform and soar into the high heavens. For Su Hong, Star City was ultimately just the starting point. His true sky was in much vaster places: Magic City, the Imperial Capital, or even the Myriad Race Battlefield. Those are the places where only those at the very top can survive. As the sun began to set, Su Hong stepped into his home. He called out in a familiar, soft, and warm voice. In the kitchen, Su Meng was setting the table, and he immediately turned around to ask about the results. When he found out his son took first place, he could hardly contain his joy, repeatedly patting Su Hong on the shoulder. His eyes were full of pride. It wasn't just about the ranking. What he cared about more was the opportunity that came with it. And when Su Hong confirmed he could join the training camp, the joy on his father's face was clearer than ever. But that warm atmosphere was quickly shattered by a knock at the door. The woman standing outside didn't beat around the bush at all. She wanted to use money to buy Su Hong's spot in the training camp. She laid out $30,000 right in front of them. What made it even more annoying was her condescending attitude. constantly emphasizing how brutal and dangerous the place was. She compared their family's status as if they had no right to even set foot there. Su Yun began to look worried. Su Meng stayed calm and asked just one question. Could Su Hong protect himself? Su Hong's answer came without a hint of hesitation, his eyes turning so sharp that it immediately put his father's mind at ease. He instantly stood by his son's side, bluntly shutting down the woman's offer and showing her the door immediately. Once the door closed, the emotions in the house felt more real than ever. It wasn't about the money, it was about trust. Su Meng didn't let him finish talking about the dangers, simply smiling and saying that if he had made his decision, the family would back him up. Su Yun chimed in half joking, half serious, reminding him that he didn't need to chase a high rank, he just needed to come back safe. Those simple words made Su Hong feel a sense of relief, and he nodded, though his inner determination only grew stronger. As night fell, he stood alone on the rooftop. Su Hong knew they believed in him, but he also knew they were definitely worried. Because of that, he couldn't allow himself to fail. He opened the system interface and looked at the martial arts points he had just accumulated. After dozens of matches, he had a total of only 285 points, which wasn't quite enough for a major breakthrough yet. He let out a soft sigh, his expression becoming serious, knowing that from here on out, every single step forward would only get harder. Tu Hong stood on the rooftop, his eyes fixed on the system panel. It looked like he was weighing a heavy decision. He muttered to himself, wondering just what kind of terrifying trump cards those geniuses at the training camp were actually holding. With that thought, he stopped hesitating and dumped all his points straight into his physical stats. In that exact moment, his body felt like it weighed a ton, a crushing sensation squeezing him from the inside out. Glowing red text flashed across his vision, the numbers climbing higher and higher, but every single point brought a massive wave of pressure. When the process finally finished, Tu Hong let out a sharp breath, his shirt completely soaked in sweat. Staring at the new numbers, he was exhausted but curious. He was still quite away from his limit, and he couldn't even imagine what would happen once he finally reached it. But before he could even catch his breath, another discovery made him stop dead in his tracks. His breathing technique had leveled up all on its own. No special requirements, no resources spent, just regular old cultivation, and he'd still managed a breakthrough. That sparked a bold idea. Since it was working like this, why not take advantage and keep going? So, he dove right back into his training, no rest and no hesitation. He had one goal and one goal only, to get even stronger before stepping foot into that training camp. As the first light of dawn broke, Tu Hong opened his eyes, his gaze sharper than ever before. The system showed results that even surprised him. His breathing technique had leveled up again, and his blood chi had noticeably jumped too. Trading one night of sleep for this kind of progress? Totally worth it. That morning, before he left, Van gave him one last warning, her voice trembling with worry. All she wanted was for him to come back safe. Man was a different story. He tried to play it tough, pushing the kid to go out there and take that #1 spot. Tu Hong didn't say much, he just gave a nod and walked away. But as he turned his back, he didn't see the way his uncle's eyes were trembling or how his hands were clenched tight. Van was on the verge of tears, while Man stayed silent. He didn't want his own fears to become a burden for the boy. Stepping out onto the street, Tu Hong felt a bit of a heavy weight on his heart. But that feeling didn't last long, because a flashy red supercar pulled up right in front of him. Ngo Lam Tien was sitting inside, looking as cold as ever. She just gave him a short command to get in. The car sped down the empty road, and the silence between them was almost deafening. After a while, Tu Hong spoke up to ask a question, but the answer he got made the mood turn dead serious. The intel she shared about the training camp wasn't exactly comforting. It was a gathering place for some truly terrifying individuals. Some of them were already on the verge of becoming rank 2 martial artists. They were just one tiny step away. On top of that, the techniques they mastered were top tier, high level at the very least. But even after hearing all that, Tu Hong didn't show a hint of panic. His mind was racing with calculations. Sure, his blood chi might be lower for now, and he might lack resources. But when it came to his learning speed and the system in his hands, no one could touch him. With that thought, his gaze hardened with resolve. He just gave a simple thank you, but the sheer determination in his voice was crystal clear. Ngo Lam Tien caught his eye and silently sized him up. Someone who knows they're behind but can still stay this calm? That kind of mindset is the most dangerous thing of all. And in that department, at least, Tu Hong was already miles ahead of the rest. The scene shifts to the Thien Lam Mountains, a place where just hearing the name is enough to make anyone feel the pressure. Inside the vehicle, The air immediately buzzed with nervous energy as the students realized the training camp was located right in the middle of a monster-infested zone. Old Lai tried to calm everyone down, telling them that with a grandmaster on guard, they wouldn't be losing their lives that easily. But obviously, that only stopped the full-blown panic. It didn't exactly make anyone feel safe. Meanwhile, Tahong just sat there in quiet thought. He knew exactly how dangerous this place really was. These mountains stretched across several cities. The spiritual energy here was thick, but that also meant the monsters were incredibly violent. There were even beast kings here that could go toe-to-toe with a grandmaster. Out here, even the low-level monsters were way more terrifying than the ones on the outside, enough to make any ordinary martial artist think twice about stepping foot in there. After a long trek, the vehicle finally came to a halt, but the atmosphere outside felt off. Even though they couldn't see anything, the feeling of being watched was so strong that even Lai Du had to speak up in suspicion. Tran Sun immediately went on high alert, while Tu Hong just tightened his grip on his sleeves. He could feel a surge of danger mixed with pure excitement rising in his chest. To him, this wasn't just some test. It felt like a real battlefield. And strangely enough, he absolutely loved that feeling. As everyone climbed out, the tension in the air got even thicker. Every face in the crowd was filled with suspicion, like anyone could turn into an enemy at any second. But unlike the others, Tahong seemed completely unfazed, maybe even a little confident. He took the lead and started walking. Tahong pulled Tran Sun along behind him, but they'd only gone a few steps before someone blocked their path. The guy told everyone they had to wait for the full group before the entrance exam could start. Right then, a fleet of luxury cars roared toward them, bringing an entirely different level of intensity. One by one, the big shots stepped out under everyone's watchful eyes, from geniuses with insane mental powers to the young masters of the great families. Every single one of them radiated pure, unadulterated power. Especially the big names like Lam Tin Ha or Vuong Thien Thak. They have insane talent and special physiques, making everyone else both admire and fear them. Tu Hong watched it all, his heart completely steady as he silently sized them up. These guys were the peak of their generation, but that only made him want to see just how big the gap between them really was. Once everyone had gathered, the supervisor cleared his throat and began announcing the rules. It sounded simple enough: cover 30 kilometers within 8 hours and retrieve a token from a beast to qualify for the camp. But anyone who knew the terrain knew this was no walk in the park. In the Thien Lam Mountains, you could run into a high-level beast at any second. It could even cost you your life. While everyone else was shaking in their boots, Tahong was looking at it from a totally different angle. To him, 8 hours wasn't pressure, it was an opportunity. If he played his cards right, he could finish the mission and hunt extra beasts for martial points. When someone asked about facing monsters way above their level, the answer they got only made the tension thicker. If you are unlucky, you are out. Sure, someone might save you, but your chance is gone. Instantly, resentment spread through the crowd. A lot of people felt these rules relied way too much on luck. The strong might fail, while the weak could skate by on a lucky break. But no matter how much they complained, the rules were set. In that moment, everyone realized this wasn't just a test. It was a real cull. A place where strength, guts, and even luck would decide who got to stay. The air in the forest suddenly felt tight as the commander growled. Fairness? On a real battlefield, there is no such thing as fairness. You spend 10 years training, step onto the battlefield, and get killed by someone stronger just because they felt like it. Who are you going to complain to then? If you want to live, you learn to dodge danger, crush the weak, and even fight against the odds. Those are the real rules. The crowd went silent after that, though a few people just smirked and nodded along. If you are scared of dying, then get the hell out of here. Don't waste my time, you bunch of losers. That one sentence lit the fuse, and both sides were ready to tear each other apart. Insults and provocations flew back and forth. If it weren't for the rule against fighting before entering the mountains, they would have started a bloodbath right then and there. The commander just said coldly, "Fighting is banned in the camp, but once you are in the mountains, it is up to you. Steal tokens or beat each other up. We do not care." Hearing that, the vibe shifted instantly. This wasn't a test anymore. It was a mini war zone. Tahong stood to the side, his eyes darkening as he analyzed the situation. These rules were clearly forcing everyone to take each other out. More than half would definitely be eliminated, and some might even die. But to him, this was a goldmine. Fighting meant martial points, so the more chaotic it got, the better. The clock started ticking, and the commander barked the order to get moving. In a split second, the crowd surged into the forest like a dam breaking. Shouts and heavy footsteps echoed everywhere. In another corner of the forest, two figures were already hot on each other's heels. Van Vi roared, threatening to beat his opponent until he crawled home. Lu Thao wasn't backing down either, ready to end the other guy's journey right there. The moment they met, they traded blows. Flames erupted, the air shook, and the surrounding trees trembled violently. To Hong watched from a distance for a bit, his eyes showing clear disappointment. These so-called geniuses turned out to be nothing special. Beating them probably wouldn't even give him many points. He was about to turn away and hunt beasts instead. But just then, their insults reached his ears, calling him a broke loser who would always be poor, no matter how hard he tried. Every word hit a nerve. To Hong smirked, a spark of interest lighting up his eyes. Looks like the points found me instead. It would be a waste to walk away now. Without hesitating, he stepped right between them, his voice calm but mocking. Quit fighting each other and try hitting me instead. They both froze for a second before bursting into mocking laughter. Another poor brat, looking to die. But To Hong just stood there, cool as a cucumber, and made an offer. Why don't you two team up against me? How about that? Before he could finish, Van Vi lost it and lunged. But the second he got close, To Hong stepped back and spun around. A clean, lightning-fast kick slammed right into the guy's gut. A dull thud echoed, and before Van Vi even knew what hit him, he was sent flying. His body slammed into the ground. Lu Thao stood there frozen, with only one thought in his head. How is this possible? His strength was equal to Van Vi's, yet his friend was taken down in a single move. Before he could snap out of it, To Hong turned his gaze toward him. His eyes went cold. It is your turn now. Those 4 words were enough to send a chill down his spine, but it was already too late. To Hong didn't give him a chance to react. He lunged like a ghost, his staff swinging down with total precision. The fight was pretty much over the moment it started. Before he could even process it, To Hong turned to him, his eyes icy. It is your turn now. That single sentence made his blood run cold. But it was too late for regrets. To Hong didn't give him a second to breathe. He moved like a shadow, his staff swinging down decisively. The fight was essentially over the second he moved. Lu Thao was sent flying like a rag doll, rolling several times on the ground, his mind a complete blank as to what just happened. His eyes were full of confusion. To Hong stood there, casually dusting off his hands, his voice ice cold. Who told you guys you could look down on ordinary cultivators? All around them, the people watching from the shadows began to whisper, and the atmosphere instantly turned electric. Someone muttered, "Where the hell did this guy come from?" Those two were in a life-and-death struggle, and he jumps in and takes them both out in one shot. Does this count as being disqualified? In the distance, the commander only gave a quick glance before replying shortly, "It doesn't count. As long as no one has called for help, the test continues." The order was passed down, and everyone returned to watching in silence. A moment later, Lu Thao regained consciousness, clutching his face and gritting his teeth, his head throbbing with pain. But when he saw To Hong's staff swinging toward him, he instinctively recoiled, his eyes filled with clear wariness. He still tried to force a tough tone. "I've never been humiliated like this before. Don't let me catch you again." Van Vi wasn't about to back down either, grumbling defensively. "I was just being careless earlier. Otherwise, that kid wouldn't have stood a chance." But then, the two looked at each other, shared a silent beat, and finally lowered their voices. "I'm sorry, I went too far just now. You really are strong." The other nodded in admission. "Your strength isn't bad either. I shouldn't have underestimated you." The tense atmosphere suddenly shifted into an unlikely alliance. Van Vi patted his shoulder. "Let's go find that guy and settle the score." Lu Thao gave a cold laugh. This time, he wanted to use that very staff to beat the kid back a few times just to vent his anger. Meanwhile, To Hong had long since departed. He ventured deep into the forest alone, his footsteps light but his gaze constantly alert. Suddenly, a rustling sound nearby made him stop in his tracks. Only a split second later, a pack of long-fanged rank, one wild boars charged out from the bushes, aggressive and incredibly fast. To Hong didn't panic at all. His eyes flashed, and his body moved like a bolt of lightning, dodging and unleashing the thunderbolt fist simultaneously. Each punch carried an explosive power that knocked the savage beasts back. Looking at the system panel that popped up, he frowned slightly. Before, fighting a martial artist earned him dozens of points. Now that he's gotten stronger, the points have actually decreased. It really is harder to make a living the stronger you get. He shook his head, pushing the thought aside. His main goal was still the tokens, but unfortunately, after checking all the wild boars, there was nothing. It seemed only higher-tier beasts carried these things. Time flew by, and 30 minutes later, the entire forest suddenly became eerily quiet. Tahong stopped, his gaze sharpening. Since entering the forest, he had encountered dozens of beasts every hour, but now, there wasn't a single one in sight. This abnormal feeling immediately put him on high alert. And then, from the shadows, a massive figure slowly stepped out. A high-tier rank 1 midnight black tiger. Its heavy aura pressed down, making the air feel as if it were freezing solid. But in contrast to that tension, Tahong actually broke into a smile. Finally, a worthy prey. Without hesitation, he lunged forward. His void-piercing finger erupted, landing a blow that made the black tiger roar in agony. Before it could counterattack, Tahong closed the gap, and his spear came down decisively, finishing it on the spot. The system immediately flashed a notification. Plus 35 martial points. This was a number he was quite satisfied with. With his current strength, killing a high-tier beast was as easy as pie. He quickly cut open the beast's belly, his eyes lighting up when he saw the token inside. It took nearly 3 hours just to find one. This definitely wasn't easy. Thinking it over, Tahong began to analyze. The deeper he went, the stronger the beasts, but their numbers were fewer. If he only hunted the strong ones, it wouldn't be as efficient as clearing out large numbers on the outer edges. Quantity was the real key to earning points as fast as possible. The clock in his head reminded him that there were only 5 hours left. His gaze instantly turned determined. He had to make every second count, and so, the forest quickly fell into chaos. Packs of beasts were wiped out. Wild boar carcasses were scattered everywhere, with only a single figure moving relentlessly through it all. He dodged, countered, and accumulated martial points like a machine. After dozens of consecutive battles, he finally encountered a mid-tier beast. This time, a single punch caused the air to explode, the sound echoing throughout the entire forest, leaving behind nothing but the desperate screams of the beasts he had just crushed. In its final moment, the beast only managed to see Tahong's silhouette reflected in its eyes before everything went dark. The punch landed so fast it didn't even have time to resist, the explosive power of the fist directly sending its massive body flying. The shockwave even knocked down an ancient tree behind it. Tahong stood still, slowly clenching his fist as a clear realization dawned on him. Now that his mortal body had surpassed 60%, pure physical strength alone was enough to overwhelm a mid-tier rank 1 beast. His gaze swept across the system panel, and the number displayed made him frown slightly. 254 martial points. He was still over 100 points short of hitting the cap for his mortal body progress, and there were only 3 hours left. There wasn't much time left to waste. As the thought crossed his mind, he prepared to continue the hunt. But right then, the entire forest suddenly shook from a piercing, ear-splitting sound. It was like an ultrasonic wave sweeping across the landscape, causing the surrounding air to distort in an instant. Tahong jerked around, his eyes turning cold and sharp. What just happened? Immediately after, a massive dark shadow tore through the sky, its wings unfolding to create pulses of terrifying pressure. Every beat of those wings sends out a massive shockwave, crushing the trees below. Tahong looked up, his heart racing. That wasn't just any beast, it was the legendary Golden Rock King. A single flap of its wings carries that much power? If it went all out, this entire region wouldn't stand a chance. A deafening explosion ripped through the forest as ancient. Massive trees were torn apart like paper, wood splinters flying everywhere. Tahong retreated quickly, his eyes narrowing as a bone-chilling thought crossed his mind. What kind of thing could possess such terrifying destructive power? His heart sank, all his previous confidence vanishing in an instant. Standing before a being like this, he realized he was nothing more than an ant. Suddenly, his eyes caught a flash of light. Before he could even process it, a cold voice rang out. "Golden Rock King, I'm borrowing this territory. What the hell are you doing here?" A human figure hovered in midair, radiating an overwhelming aura. It was Tan Thien Liet. The Beast King immediately roared in protest. "I never agreed to lend you anything." The air instantly turned thick with tension. Tan Thien Liet gave a cold smirk. "Then I'll just beat you until you comply." As soon as he spoke, the Golden Rock's feathers shot out like countless blades. Those razor-sharp feathers tore through the air as they plummeted, but the man just swung his hand, a blinding light erupting to meet the attack head-on. When the two forces collided, it looked like the sky was cracking open. Shock waves rippled out, making the very space around them tremble violently. The battle in the sky was pure madness. Every strike carried enough force to make the forest below feel like it was about to collapse. Tan Tien Liat shouted mid-fight, "Don't make me say it again. Get lost." Finally, the Golden Rock King let out a furious roar and retreated, throwing out one last threat before disappearing into the horizon. As the air finally settled, Tan Tien Liat took a soft breath and immediately sent his voice echoing across the entire area. "I am 7th grade Grandmaster Tan Tien Liat. To all students, do not panic. The examination will continue as planned." Down on the ground, To Hong stood frozen, his eyes still glued to the sky. So this is the power of a 7th grade warrior? One man was able to force a Beast King to retreat. That feeling made him clench his fists, vowing to reach that level one day. Afterward, Tan Tien Liat headed back to the monitoring station. As soon as he landed, he let out a half-joking complaint. "I just wanted to borrow the place, and I still had to throw hands. What a pain." The two men beside him immediately started kissing his feet with praise. They claimed he was even stronger than the rumors said, since he made the golden-winged great eagle too scared to fight back, but he just frowned, clearly uninterested. He ordered them to pull up the surveillance to see if any of the students could actually withstand the pressure from that fight. Images quickly appeared on screen. Most students were pinned down, unable to move, but a few stood out. Vuong Thien Thak, high-level 1st grade, blood energy 340, 95% fire affinity, special constitution. Lam Tinha was using telekinesis to neutralize the pressure, and Tu Yen was holding her own as well. Tan Tien Liat nodded in approval at the three of them, but as the list went on, he started to frown. Why are these all kids from wealthy families? What about the students from the regular schools? When he heard the report that First High only had a few people who had just broken through to the early level, he was ready to skip them, thinking they weren't worth his time. But right then, a certain image made everyone freeze. It was a young man who had just endured that terrifying pressure, and yet, he was still casually hunting beasts like nothing had happened. The supervisor's voice trembled as he spoke. That's a student from First High." The other person couldn't hide his shock either, uttering just one word, "Monster." Tan Tien Liat raised an eyebrow, glancing at his two subordinates who were losing their cool, his voice sounding a bit annoyed. "Both of you are 5th grade already. What kind of genius haven't you seen? Getting this worked up just shows your lack of mental discipline." But when he looked back at the screen, there was clearly a spark of interest in his eyes for that young boy. Looking at the monitor, Tan Tien Liat was calm at first, but a few seconds later, his eyes bugged out and his face completely changed. Only one thought remained in his head. Is this thing even human? A 100% compatibility rate across all attributes? On top of that, he has a special constitution. Calling him a monster is an understatement. He's a straight-up freak of nature. For a tiny place like Tin City to produce this kind of anomaly, it's a once-in-a-millennium event. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but burst into an excited laugh. This time, he had truly stumbled upon a treasure. But the joy didn't last long. His eyes landed on another number. Early level 1st grade, blood energy only 123. It made no sense for someone with such terrifying talent to have such a low rank. The man next to him scratched his head and explained. To Hong is practicing 7 different types of guiding arts simultaneously. Hearing that, Tan Tien Liat nearly lost it at the sheer stupidity. Practicing 7 types at once is basically career suicide. How the hell is his rank supposed to increase with that kind of training? He muttered irritably. Tin City's martial arts president is Enjo Lam Tien, right? How could he not explain something so basic to the kid? Right then, a report came in that the students had started to gather. Without another word, he immediately turned to go inspect them. As he appeared before the crowd, the top 3 geniuses bowed in unison to greet him. He gave a slight nod, his eyes filled with a touch of satisfaction. 6 hours after the exam began, groups of students started trickling into the assembly area. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, chatting as they walked about how they nearly died in the forest. Some even recalled the sight of the Golden Rock Beast King, their hearts still trembling with fear. Time ticked towards 7:30, and the crowd started whispering. Anyone who hadn't arrived by now was surely disqualified. Qin Tianli scanned the area, feeling a bit anxious. Where the hell is that kid Su Hong? Don't tell me he got lost in the woods and got cut. Losing a treasure like him would be a total nightmare. Just as he was getting frustrated, a lone figure finally appeared in the distance. His clothes were tattered, and he was covered in dust, but his aura was incredibly stable. Su Hong stepped in, letting out a breath of relief. He'd almost lost track of time while farming points. Whispers immediately broke out around him. Looking at his state, he seemed to be in even worse shape than the rest of them. But strangely, there weren't any visible wounds on him. Just how many beasts did this guy kill to end up looking like that? In another corner, Wenwei and Lu Tao stared him down, their eyes cold. They'd finally caught sight of him, but they weren't in a rush. They'd settle the score once they were inside the camp. Some looked at Su Hong with interest. Making it back just in time was definitely no easy feat. When the clock hit 8 o'clock, the official list was closed, and those who hadn't arrived were disqualified. Lindsay stepped forward and announced the rules in a toneless voice. Inside the camp, there is a gravity room, a movement training hall, and a live combat zone with beasts. At the martial arts pavilion, you can exchange points for techniques, footwork, pills, or even grade A weapons. Hearing this, Su Hong's eyes immediately lit up. Coming here was definitely worth it. But a moment later, the next rule dampened everyone's spirits. To use any resources, you need contribution points. These points can only be earned through your performance in training or as special rewards. With that, the supervisor dismissed the crowd. Those with energy left went to practice, while the injured headed off to rest. Su Hong stepped into his assigned private room and shut the door. He finally relaxed, having some quiet space for his secret cultivation. He focused on the system panel. He currently had a total of 354 martial points. Without a second thought, he poured everything into his mortal body. The red numbers climbed steadily from 70% until they hit 100%. In that instant, his body vibrated violently, as if something was shattering his old limits. An official evolution process began. Su Hong's body surged with intense energy, unleashing a shockwave of sonic power throughout the room. After a while, Su Hong let out a soft breath and clenched his fist in amazement. I can't believe I can unleash this much raw power now. This overlord body has unparalleled strength. I've never even heard of it before. It is only at the low spirit stage, which means this overlord physique can keep leveling up. Just how insane will it become when it evolves further? This special physique is truly dominating. I need to go test out exactly how strong it is. Su Hong gripped a nearby object tightly. He froze. This was grade C alloy, and he just crushed it into scrap with one hand. Grade C alloy spears are expensive. This one cost me a fortune. Wait, I think I actually scavenged this spear in the wilderness, so it didn't cost me anything. I need to hurry up and rack up enough contribution points to trade for a real grade A alloy spear. Training can get me those points. I wonder if I can handle carrying several hundred pounds? Over at the warehouse, people were buzzing when they saw the 3,000-pound mark. Wang Tianshuo muttered, "Still a bit light." The others were stunned that he considered 3,000 kilograms light, yet he could still jump around with it. A normal rank 1 martial artist can usually only carry a few hundred pounds. She remarked on Wang Tianshuo's strength, saying he was like a total monster, a literal wild bull. Nearby, Baimu reported that Wang Tianshuo could easily carry 3,000 pounds. It was no wonder he possessed the barbarian god body. Grandmaster Qin, about Su Hong learning all 7 guidance techniques. When are we going to talk to him and explain things? Qin Tianlai replied, "We can't just confront him directly like that. Geniuses are always arrogant. If we're blunt, it'll just backfire. We have to make him realize it on his own, so he gives up voluntarily. Is the night raid team ready?" Lindsay reported, "I still need a little more time. Coordinating the combat power for the team is a bit of a headache. These students just finished their entrance exam, so they're feeling pretty relaxed right now. If they are hit with a surprise attack in the middle of the night, they will definitely fall into total despair." He ordered, "Set Su Hong up against a high-level rank 1 martial artist. I want him to be completely crushed. After that, I'll explain the disadvantages of practicing all 7 techniques. He will definitely listen and give up then." He was absolutely stunned. A high-rank stage 1 martial artist boasts a vitality of over 400 and a combat power of 5,000 points. Meanwhile, Su Hong's vitality is barely over 100. If he keeps pushing himself like this, it's not going to end well. What if his path to power crumbles? Thean Liet snapped back in annoyance. "No way, I'm just trying to help him fix his mistakes. If his resolve breaks that easily, then he's nothing but a total failure." Meanwhile, Su Hong noticed a commotion nearby. Vuong Thian Thak is heading into the gravity training room. "You guys gotta go see this," he muttered as he walked. "Is everyone really going to watch Vuong Thian Thak train? I should check it out later too. Wait, is this the smart bracelet used for scoring?" Right at that moment, his eyes landed on the device in front of him. Su Hong stood before the equipment panel and froze for a second when he saw the maximum load of 10 tons, a number that could take anyone's breath away. Super heavy alloy, a material meant almost exclusively for physical monsters. He couldn't help but frown as a question immediately popped into his head. Who on earth is this thing even for? The pressure started to set in quickly. Even if he could wear a weighted vest, once the weight exceeded his body's limits, his speed and reflexes would plummet. Maintaining that long-term just wasn't realistic. He glanced at the 5-ton vest, which seemed like his most stable limit for now. Not wanting to stand around, Su Hong started testing right there in the room. His body moved fluidly through the heavy air, every step feeling like he was being dragged down. After taking a deep breath, he pressed his hands against the ground, his gaze turning serious. He figured 5 tons was still the most suitable for his current stage. Meanwhile, his thoughts drifted back to those 3. Vuong Tien Thak and the other 2 geniuses. They were all high-rank stage 1s, so they definitely weren't much weaker than him. They might even be a bit stronger. If that was the case, watching them train might actually be helpful. Just then, a shout rang out, grabbing the attention of the entire training area. Vuong Tien Thak was in the gravity room. He wasn't just carrying 3 tons, he had gone straight into full training mode. And he didn't stop there. He cranked the gravity up to double. Everyone could see him straining, but he was actually enduring a staggering 6 tons. Hearing this, Su Hong narrowed his eyes. Only 3 tons? He silently compared their stats and gave a slight shake of his head. It seemed he had underestimated their physical strength before. Just then, his eyes landed on 2 people standing not far away. Transun and Luke Du. They were standing outside the training area, looking a bit hesitant. Su Hong walked up and asked them point blank, "Why aren't you guys training?" The answer he got was filled with clear insecurity. "It's full of monsters in there. If we go in, we'll just be compared and embarrassed. Without the right skills, it's just extra pressure." Su Hong just gave a light smile and patted their shoulders to reassure them. So that's what it is. But their reaction was the exact opposite of what he expected. Transun asked blankly, "Are you seriously going in?" Luke Du hurriedly advised, "Wait until there are fewer people. Otherwise it'll be super embarrassing." The conversation immediately caused a stir. Many people burst out laughing, and some even mocked him to his face. The guy in last place wants to use the gravity room, and he wants to compete with Vuong Tien Thak? What a joke. Su Hong ignored them. Only one thing was clear in his mind. Access to the gravity room was incredibly valuable. Only elite families had easy access to this. Skipping it would be a total waste, especially since he only needed to set it to 1.5 times gravity. That way, he could make his training session much more effective. The moment the gravity system kicked in, a crushing heaviness slammed into him. Su Hong stumbled for a second. It was heavier than he expected. Outside, the crowd erupted in laughter, some shaking their heads in mockery. He can't even handle 1.5 times? That's pathetically weak. But inside the room, Su Hong was completely focused. Under the crushing weight, every movement of his guidance technique became heavier, but also much clearer and more effective. He quickly realized his progress was skyrocketing. As time passed, sweat began to soak his entire body. 2 hours later, Su Hong opened his eyes, looking sharper and brighter than ever. He let out a soft breath as the results flashed through his mind. Not only were his thunder and heavenly flame guidance techniques more stable, but his other techniques had also broken through to level 1. His vitality had jumped from 126 to 130 points, a significant step forward. He quickly assessed his progress. The gravity room exceeded his expectations. Maybe the movement and beast rooms would be just as good. When he stepped outside, he was drenched in sweat. Someone immediately sneered. "He barely went in and he's already out? Guess he couldn't hack it." Su Hong didn't argue. He calmly took off his weighted vest and swallowed a breath, muttering to himself, "Man, it's hot in there." That simple act instantly shut everyone up. No one was laughing anymore. The people in the training camp started buzzing when they saw what just happened. It turns out he had been wearing a weighted vest the whole time. But the real question was, how heavy was it? Looking at his exhausted face, everyone had to admit that 500 kilograms was clearly way past his limit. But what really makes people narrow their eyes in disbelief is the fact that he can grit his teeth and hold his ground in the gravity chamber for over 2 hours. If he can do that, his strength is definitely no joke. Even if he is considered the weakest in the group, he still has a solid foundation. But comparing him to Wang Tiantuo is just impossible. There is no chance. Someone let out a bitter laugh, saying, "Don't even mention him. In this camp, Who would dare to compare themselves to a monster like Wang Tianchuo? Right at that moment, Wang Tianchuo prepared to make his appearance. The gravity level reached 6 tons, yet he still persisted for over 2 hours. Just hearing about it is enough to give anyone the chills. Everyone had to admit that his physical intensity is absolutely the best in the entire training camp. And no one can argue with that. Someone shook their head with a forced smile. If it were me, I would be lucky to last 30 minutes under 500 kilograms. While they were gossiping, a heavy bag was suddenly thrown down, making the whole crowd jump and spin around. Wang Tiantuo only let out a light sigh, saying, "I guess that counts as a bit of a warm-up," but in everyone else's eyes, that weight was still terrifying. Xinghe walked over at that moment, smiling with a mix of praise and a challenge. "Old Wang, when it comes to raw power, I really am no match for you. How about we head over to the agility room and have a match there?" Wang Tianchuo glanced at him and gave a blunt reply. "You practice A-rank agility, and you are wind elemental. I would have to be out of my mind to try and compete with you." In another corner, Su Hong fell into deep thought. A-rank agility. The power of the overlord physique is truly formidable. But right now, he is lacking exactly that kind of high-level movement technique. At the same time, inside the agility training room, people began to look on in horror as they witnessed what had just been activated. A-rank agility, the flying swan cloud step, is just too powerful and too fast. Inside the training space, arrows were firing as thick as rain. A normal person practicing at level 3 would already find it nearly impossible to dodge. Yet Lin Xinghe was casually breezing through level 10 difficulty. Someone cried out, "He is so fast that the naked eye can't even keep up. I couldn't last even a single second in there." Yet, he still has enough energy to strike an elegant pose in midair. Some people even stared blankly at the flower petals appearing out of nowhere, their mouths frozen shut. Is this a real fight or a performance? He looks so flashy, but it is undeniably cool. On the progress display screen, Flying Swan Cloud Step was only at 1%. Su Hong watched intently, his gaze gradually shifting. This agility technique is definitely worth learning. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he dashed straight into the simulation zone, causing everyone around him to freeze. People turned around in pure shock. What does he think he is doing? Does he really think he can learn an A-rank agility technique just by watching Lin Xinghe's movements? What a joke. However, immediately after, the progress on the screen began to skyrocket. 8%, 15%, 30%, 43%, 63%, 78%, and then 93%. Congratulations. Flying Swan Cloud Step has reached the basic mastery level. Su Hong let out a breath. He had finally grasped the #1 A-rank agility technique. Even though Lin Xinghe's movements were a bit awkward to watch, Su Hong had never seen the standard version, so he had to learn from that one for now. He immediately calculated in his head that since he had mastered this agility, there was no need to stay in the training room any longer. It would be better to head over to the beast hunting zone to earn martial points and increase his blood chi. Meanwhile, everyone still looked at him like he was some kind of alien. While they were constantly clapping and praising that strange style from earlier, Su Hong began to realize that someone was watching him. On the other side, Liu He and Wen Wei had locked onto their target. "We finally found him. He is probably heading to the beast room, so let's just block him there. Once he steps out, we will teach him a lesson he will never forget." The scene shifted to the beast room area, where Yu He was laughing loudly while facing Xiao Yan, their exchange full of tension. It is still undecided who the truly strongest person in this training camp is. Yu, he curled her lip. She believed that relying only on mental power wouldn't be enough to defeat her wild beasts, but Xiao Yan fired back with total confidence. "Do not underestimate a spirit master." Standing to the side, Su Hong watched quietly, wondering about the true power of a spirit master. Since he had never seen how this type actually fought in a real battle, this might be a good chance to broaden his horizons. After this, he would still go hunt beasts to accumulate martial points and continue to increase his own strength. Su Hong suddenly remembered the scene from just a moment ago, and his mind still felt like he had witnessed something that defied common sense. She was flying. She wasn't using any leverage, and she wasn't jumping. She was just floating in midair perfectly naturally. Walking on air is a technique that only a grandmaster is supposed to reach, yet a spirit master was able to do it. What kind of existence is a spirit master, anyway? Right then, Xiao Yan, standing opposite him, lightly raised her hand. It was a simple movement, but it made the atmosphere change instantly. Su Hong only had time to sense the danger crashing down in a split second. 3 high-tier rank 1 black tigers were completely wiped out. Those flashes of light were like invisible blades. They tore through space itself. What was that? He narrowed his eyes as the remaining beast, which had been roaring fiercely, suddenly froze in its tracks. His eyes bulged, as if an invisible force was crushing his entire body. Tu Hong stood frozen as a surge of mental power forcibly seized control. With just a casual flick of her hand, Xiaoyan ended the entire battle cleanly. It was only then that he truly understood. Those beams of light weren't just anything. They were daggers condensed from pure mental energy, allowing her to fly through the air and manipulate objects from a distance. To think she could directly suppress her opponent like that, it is no wonder mental masters are seen as beings that ordinary warriors simply cannot stand against. Outside, the crowd could not help but scream, "Damn it, what the hell is that? Where did that giant sword come from?" Space itself seemed stretched to its limit. In the air, mental power exploded as a massive, colossal sword slowly began to take shape. The pressure was so heavy it felt like people were suffocating. Xiaoyan shot a cold glance downward, swung her arm, and the giant sword slashed down. A single strike that looked like it would tear the entire battlefield in half. Tu Hong watched, his heart racing. She had not been carrying any weapons earlier. Moreover, if you calculated the actual mass of what just appeared, it had to be at least several tons. Lin Xinghe, standing nearby, spoke flatly. That is a specialized skill of a mental master, and she has already reached A rank. The entire crowd immediately erupted in a frenzy. A rank, another A rank, what is wrong with this camp? Is everyone here A rank? Does Wang Tianshuo have one too? Lin Xinghe curled his lip. He also possessed an A rank martial skill, with an offensive attribute, making the air around him feel like it was about to explode. Monsters. Are they all just monsters? Tu Hong's gaze darkened. Wang Tianshuo did not even need a skill. He blew a beast apart with just one punch. If he actually used an A-rank martial skill, how terrifying would that be? Only one thought remained in his head. He had come to the right place. Right then, someone yelled. He blew a beast apart with one punch without using a skill? Was that just pure muscle power? Tu Hong glanced over, his heart wavering slightly. If he is already this strong without a martial skill, maybe I should find a chance to learn it later. For now, his goal was still very clear: become a mental master. His spiritual power was only at 26.5. To get started, he needed to exceed 100, which meant he was still 73.5 points short, equivalent to 735 martial points. Tu Hong's gaze grew colder. It seemed like it was time to start for real. Just then, a cold laugh echoed from the distance. See that? He has gone in. Everyone else is busy watching Wang Tianshuo and Xiaoyan. No one is paying attention to this side. This is our chance. We have to give him a lesson he will never forget. Tu Hong frowned. What are you guys talking about? He just opened his phone and saw a bright red notification. A challenge, 10 high-tier rank, 1 beasts. The air instantly turned icy. Is he insane? Liu He and Wen Wei's faces went pale the moment they heard the announcement. Both of them shouted almost simultaneously, "Should we go get the instructor? If we don't, that kid is dead for sure. It is too late. He will be torn to shreds in just a few seconds." But they fell silent, realizing there was no time left. Their eyes suddenly turned cold. It looked like they would not be able to get their revenge this time. Tu Hong stood in the middle of the battlefield. His eyes were cold as ice. Without saying a word, he simply raised his hand and gestured a challenge. Bring it on. The other two immediately changed expression. Without any further hesitation, they lunged forward in a joint attack. But the moment they moved, Tu Hong took a step to the side. His body glided like a ghost, easily dodging every single strike. He did not stop. Pulling both hands back slightly, his mental power condensed into 2 energy spheres before exploding outward. A massive wave of force swept straight forward, making the air vibrate violently. The 2 attackers' faces twisted in shock. They cried out in unison, "How can a rank 1 beginner warrior unleash this much power? This makes no sense. Even a mid-tier warrior might not survive if they were surrounded." Wen Wei suddenly froze as a familiar feeling washed over him. Wait a second, that movement technique. That is Lin Xinghe's flying cloud step. Liu. He immediately shot him down. No way. He is just a high school student. How could he possibly learn such a high-tier movement technique? Is he from some great noble family? Wen Wei frowned and whispered. Or maybe he just saw it once and taught himself. But even he shook his head at the thought. Learning an A-rank movement technique just by watching is impossible. Liu, He bit his lip, his voice trembling slightly. I am not fighting anymore. We are no match for him. Wenwei stood still for a few seconds, his eyes full of resentment, but he finally let out a sigh. Forget it. Even if this is a bitter pill to swallow, we have to choke it down. But suddenly, he pointed toward the distant battlefield. His voice cracked completely. Wait, look at that. Both of them turned their heads and were instantly stunned. You have got to be kidding me. While we were standing here talking, all 10 high-tier rank 1 beasts have already been dealt with. The air went silent for a few seconds. Hong brushed off his hands, his voice calm. 10 beasts for a total of 81 martial points. That is less than 10 points per beast on average. It seems the stronger you get, the harder it is to earn points. He looked up at his surroundings. No more time to waste. Next. As soon as he finished speaking, a beast with long claws lunged down from above. Hong's eyes flashed with killing intent. His diamond punch exploded, delivering a strike that made the very ground tremble. The beasts nearby instinctively scrambled back. He let out a cold laugh, his voice dripping with excitement. Where do you think you're going? Hand over those points. A second later, he lunged forward, grabbing a beast by its tail and swinging it with all his might. Its entire body was hurled through the air like a living sledgehammer. The two guys watching from the sidelines stood there, frozen solid. Luha swallowed hard, his voice sounding dry as a bone. You know what they say. An eye for an eye. Yeah. Forget it. I'm letting him off the hook, Van Vi said, nodding frantically. Let's get out of here before we end up getting tossed like that monster. Looking back at the battlefield, they realized something even more terrifying. Vuong Thien Thok had slaughtered 9 high-tier first-grade beasts in less than 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Tu Yen, who hadn't even moved from her spot, had taken down 8 of them. Right then, someone ran over and asked, Hey, you guys are back already? Did you get your revenge? Did you take him down? The two of them forced an awkward smile. Oh yeah. Sure did. They lied. Though they were shaking like leaves inside. Take him down? If they hadn't run fast enough, they'd probably be lying on the ground dead, just like those monsters. This training camp was literally crawling with freaks. Before they could even finish that thought, the crowd around them erupted in cheers. They're out. How many contribution points did they get? One guy panted as he answered, 280 points. Tu Yen calmly replied, 270 points. The entire crowd went dead silent. A high-tier first-grade beast was only worth 5 points. That meant they had slaughtered over 50 of them in no time at all. The atmosphere felt completely frozen. As soon as the words left her mouth, the crowd began to buzz. One guy bragged about earning 100 contribution points while wearing his weighted vest. Others shook their heads in disappointment. I only got 50, one said. Another chimed in, I barely got 20. I hauled a whole ton and still only got 30 points, someone sighed. And I only got 10. The group started comparing notes, wondering who actually won the hunting match. Eventually, the name being whispered the most was Tu Hong. Quite a few people sighed. Lam Tin Ha's score was absolutely insane. Combined with those 3 other freaks, the best anyone else could hope for was 4th place. In another corner, Van Vi and Lu Ha shared a look, their eyes filled with complicated emotions. These people are so clueless. There's a monster in this training camp even scarier than those 3 combined. Time ticked by. An hour later, the battlefield was thick with the heavy stench of blood, with beast carcasses scattered everywhere. Hong sat down in a corner, letting out a long breath after the non-stop fighting. He told himself that even with his overlord body, an hour of non-stop slaughtering was starting to take its toll. He was still a long way off from his goal of 735 points. Between the hunt and the weighted vest, he had raked in about 700 contribution points. 400 of those were from kills, and 300 were from the load he carried. He muttered to himself, I wonder if there's anything worth trading for in the martial arts pavilion. As night fell, he stood in front of the martial arts pavilion. Dim lights flickered over the rows of bookshelves and the bulletin boards crammed with missions. Tu Hong scanned the list. First-grade blood essence pills were 10 points. Blood recovery pills were 20, and mind-gathering pills were 30. High-grade blood essence pills were over 50 points. A-rank martial arts techniques were obscenely expensive. Explosive palm was 2,000 points, and bone-chilling netherfire palm was 2,800. The swift heaven movement technique was 3,000 points, and A-rank spear techniques weren't any cheaper. He shook his head slightly. A-rank techniques were a total luxury. Even the cheapest one was 2,000 points. On the other hand, the pills were much more reasonable, especially the mind-gathering ones. Just then, The woman in charge stepped up to assist him. Find anything you like, student? She secretly thought to herself that since he looked like a low-tier first grade, he probably couldn't afford anything significant. Tu Hong pointed at the list and asked, "Are these mind-gathering pills, the ones that boost mental power?" She nodded. "That's right, but they only work the first time you take them. The higher the grade, the better the effect," she explained. Tu Hong pondered for a moment. The highest one available was a rank 4 mind-gathering pill, priced at 500 contribution points. He said calmly, "I'll take one rank 4 mind-gathering pill." She jumped, quickly double-checking. "Are you sure? 500 points is a lot, it's not 50. Tu Hong nodded. "That's right. Actually, I want the rank 5 one." The air went still for a second before she blurted out, "What? Rank 5? When she checked his contribution points, her face went pale. "You actually have 700 points." The pill was brought out in no time. Tu Hong took it and casually added, "Do you have any dual attribute Thunderfire alloy spears left?" Her attitude flipped instantly as she gave him a beaming smile. "We certainly do. That'll be 200 points. Thank you for your business." As he walked out of the martial arts pavilion, his silhouette faded into the night, leaving only the dim streetlights illuminating the quiet training grounds. Now he had a C-rank dual attribute Thunderfire spear in his hands. Tu Hong stood still for a moment, tallying up his gains in his head. His blood essence and cultivation techniques had both improved. He'd earned nearly 500 martial points today, which was even more effective than the entire previous week. His mental power was currently at 26.5. Including these points, he was still about 25.5, short of hitting the 100 mark. He looked at the mind-gathering pill in his hand, his gaze sharpening. He hoped this one would be enough. In the darkness, he slowly tightened his fist. "Mental master. This time, I'm definitely breaking through." Without a hint of hesitation, Tu Hong tossed the mind-gathering pill into his mouth. The moment the pill touched his tongue, it dissolved instantly, turning into a soothing green light that surged through his entire body. He paused for a moment. The first thing he felt was every nerve that had been frayed from exhaustion suddenly relaxing, as if a massive weight had been lifted off him. A sense of pure comfort spread through his body, and his mind became incredibly sharp and clear. Everything around me seemed to unlock, becoming crystal clear down to the tiniest detail. A moment later, he slowly opened his eyes and checked the system panel. He whispered to himself, 50.5%. His mental power had increased by a full 24 points. That 4th-tier pill really lived up to the hype. In his head, he quickly crunched the numbers. 50.5 plus 490 martial points. That's a total of 99.5%. He was only 0.5% short, exactly 5 martial points away from hitting the 100 mark. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but feel a bit of regret. If he'd known, he would have hunted one more beast, but there was no turning back now. He'd just have to wait until tomorrow to keep grinding. He let out a long breath and decided to take a break for the time being. Meanwhile, back at the training camp warehouse, the atmosphere was buzzing. A crowd had gathered, whispering and gossiping. A tall guy holding a roster spoke up. "Bo Jingyun, aren't you supposed to be training at the martial arts university? How did you end up being sent here?" A guy nearby laughed. "Seriously, you look just like us old-timers who got called in to babysit these geniuses." Hearing that, Hao Wu frowned and barked. "Genius? What genius? If I were still in high school, none of these brats would even be worthy of standing on the same practice field as me." The tall guy gave a cold smirk. "Wang Tiantuo, the kid I'm in charge of, has already reached 340 blood chi points. I bet you weren't even close to that back in the day, were you?" Hao Wu froze, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Another person held up a tablet. "My trainee has also surpassed 300 blood chi points." The last guy smirked confidently. "I'm a mentalist. I don't think I need to say anything else for you to get the point." They flipped through the files one by one until their eyes landed on the name Su Hong. Rank, Tier 1 Novice, Blood Chi, 123. The group immediately erupted into an uproar. "What? Why did they give you such a weak student? You're the strongest in our group, even stronger than the 3 of us, and yet you're assigned to deal with a Tier 1 Novice. Did Grandmaster Qin lose his mind?" Just then, Grandmaster Qin walked over, his voice dropping low. "He didn't." Hao Wu immediately protested. "Sir, you're seriously underestimating me. He's just some low-level beginner." Grandmaster Qin glanced at him, his voice turning icy. "He's not as simple as you think. His actual combat power is on par with a high-level Tier 1. The group stood there, stunned. Blood chi of only 123, but the combat power of a high-level tier 1? What kind of freak of nature was this? Grandmaster Qin continued. His information is classified. It's not in those files. You'll understand once you trade blows with him. Hao Wu sighed heavily. I've got nearly 500 blood chi and I'm on the verge of breaking into tier 2, and yet I have to go beat up some rookie kid. Grandmaster Qin gave him a sharp tap on the head. Stop whining, go fight. If you don't go all out, you're going to regret it. Hao Wu rubbed his head and muttered under his breath. You don't have some kind of personal grudge against him, do you? But Grandmaster Qin only gave a cold smile. You can cripple him if you want, as long as you're actually capable of it. Hearing that, Hao Wu broke out in a cold sweat. He thought to himself, man, this kid Su Hong is really in for it this time. Night fell, and the training camp went silent. Hao Wu's group stealthily approached the target building. Enemy attack. Wait, hold on, big brother, let me put my pants on first. Su Hong bolted upright, his eyes turning cold and sharp. An ambush. The bedroom door was sliced wide open, and Hao Wu charged in, his cold blade swinging directly toward the bed. Su Hong twisted his body to dodge while simultaneously grabbing his spear from the bedside. His mind raced as he analyzed the situation. The All-Race Alliance usually targets human geniuses. Could it be them? He gripped his spear tight, his gaze turning icy. Hao Wu sneered. Just a tier 1 novice. Consider it bad luck that you ran into me. Su Hong quickly deduced, a high-level human warrior? So he's not from the All-Race Alliance? Actually, this is perfect. I'll treat this as a warm-up. If I take him down, I'll get those last 5 martial points. That'll be the final step I need to become a mentalist. At that thought, his eyes burned with intensity. On the other side, Hao Wu's reaction was the complete opposite. He looked at Su Hong, unable to hide his confusion. Why was a tier 1 novice not running away, but actively choosing to fight back? Is this kid's head not screwed on right? A split second later, the two collided. Su Hong used his spear to block Hao Wu's sword strike head-on. The force of the impact made them both stumble. Hao Wu was internally shaken. This power didn't feel like a novice at all. It was already pushing the limits of a high-tier tier 1. Grandmaster Qin wasn't joking, but as soon as he regained his footing, he immediately shook the thought off. No way. Is this really the kind of raw power a tier 1 warrior can possess? He gritted his teeth as a layer of purple light began to glow on his blade. At the same time, Su Hong didn't back down. Instead, his aura flared up as he pressed forward, step by step. In an instant, he knocked Hao Wu's sword aside, forcing his opponent back half a step. Hao Wu's arm trembled slightly, his eyes filled with caution. Is this kid a monster or what? Suddenly, the sword in his hand erupted in a brilliant purple light, and his aura skyrocketed. He said coldly, combat between warriors isn't just about who hits harder. Su Hong remained calm, but the spear in his hand began to crackle with golden lightning. He thought to himself, a fire attribute martial skill. This is my first time seeing one of those. Right then, Hao Wu leaped into the air, his sword stance seemingly scorching the very air around them. He roared, blazing flame slash. The arc of light came crashing down,